Hello, everyone. It is the pre-show of today's N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Hello, chat room. We got about 10 minutes before we get started. If you are watching on the replay, you can jump ahead 10 minutes. You can look at the YouTube video description, jump to a specific time link, or you can hang out with us as we make sure that things are recording. I see some recordings going here. Stream is good. It's hard for me to see the cache number from where I am. Maybe I can move this bar a little bit. There we go. It's a little better for me. You can see it just fine. That 3% means everything's working. That number gets bigger, things aren't working so great. But so far, so good. It is stormy and rainy here in Florida, so we never know exactly how things are going to go once we finally get going. It's always a mystery. It's always exciting. We never know. That's a live event for you. It'll work out. We are recording locally, so if things go completely south, well, we have something to fall back on. So we got that going for us. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. There's a lot of Florida checking in. We got first Dubai is here. That's definitively not Florida, but we got Miami here. Somebody connecting from Cayocho. You've got West Palm Beach, same general area of the world. Kenya is here. Welcome. 122 Fahrenheit in Dubai during the day. Wow, that is extreme. We're already getting super chats. Hey, Eric, thanks for the $1.99 super chat where you ask, should I focus a lot on IPv6? Well, there's some IPv6 that is in the exam, but not a lot. Check the exam objectives. I would not say focus is the word I would use, but certainly have a working knowledge of IPv6 and you're good. Hello, London and Missouri and Atlanta. And hello, Malk and St. Vincent. Good to see you again. Hello, Ohio and South Africa. There's Ocala, Florida. That's horse country right there, Ocala, Florida. It's horse country and grandma country. I think that's what it is. Isn't that the official? Maybe it's not. Maybe that's not the official Ocala. It's close to that. There was the great article this week where they had to close I-75 because cows were all over the interstate in Ocala, which that's normal Florida, people. That's how we roll. That's how it is. Hello, Nigeria and LA and South Africa and Namibia. Thank you for being here. Damascus is here. Nova Scotia. Good to have you. More Bradenton. Lots of Florida checking in. The Villages. Well, to be clear, let's be clear. They are the reigning champion of grandma country. Let's be clear. There's no question. And it's just massive. The Villages just keeps going and going and going. For those who are not familiar with the Villages in Florida, it is an enormous. Is it the largest retirement community in the world? It must be. I mean, it spans multiple counties. It's enormous. On Top of the World is second. I spend a lot of time in On Top of the World, so I'm very familiar with On Top of the World. Yes, I got kinfolk who have retired to Ocala. It's actually quite lovely. It's beautiful. It's quiet. The people are nice. It's one of those things. Hello, New Jersey and VT and Georgia. Thanks for being here. Eric says, I love your setup as well. Eric, I'll take the compliment. We've been working a little bit on it this past week. It's difficult to see where to put my light. So you'll notice this is, well, for those of you that have been here before, this is a different screen that's in the front, and we've added a Mac Studio to the mix. There it is. It's going to go eventually down here into this cabinet, this 19-inch rack that we've got here. But it's working like a champ. It's been working since this weekend. It's really been a phenomenal. It took me 3 months to get that unit. It was supposed to be here for me to really start and finish the A+ course. I started and completed it before that even shipped. So I ordered it before I started shooting video. We did shooting video, and then it never got here. So, and now it's finally here, now that I have no video to edit. But I went from, if I render a 4K video that is about 15 minutes long, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to render on my older 3 to 4-year-old iMac Pro that I was running. This system, we've gone from a 15 to 20-minute render time down to 4 minutes render time. So that is just game-changing if we can do that. It's just phenomenal. Once we start editing more video, that will be fantastic. The Socrative room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER, or check the links at professormesser.com/live. For that, we got about 4 minutes to go, and we'll start the Network Plus study group. We got a lot to go through today. Lots of things happening. Got lots going on. I am behind the scenes just churning away. We've obviously finished our A+ course. I'm writing new information. It's big. It's big. Say, Ed, you are working towards, you don't say which exam you're working towards, but you're 13, taking the exam. You started studying this month. That is all good. Keep doing what you're doing. This is an amazing area to be in. And in some ways, I'm very surprised that they paid me to do this. It was so much fun every day to work with technology and solve problems. It is remarkable that, don't tell them I said that. Do not let them know. Well, I guess you can tell them now. They've already paid me. But it's always interesting. George with the $25 super chat in the pre-show, George. Thank you so much. George writes, hi, Professor. Passing on thanks for help with the N10-007. Sat for the test, get this, June the 30th and passed. George, you took it all the way down to the wire and you passed it. Your videos and study group replays made 40% of my study material. I think it's more than that. But I'm glad at least some of that was able to help out with what you were doing. Don't think I'd be able to pass without your help. I think you would have, but I'm taking some of the credit because you gave it to me. I didn't really do much. I'm not the one who sat down and took the exam, so it's hard for me to take any credit for those things, but congratulations on that. Boy, right there on the last day the exam is offered. Remember I told you 6 months ago that there will be people taking this exam on the last day. Don't worry that you're studying that version. Just keep studying it. You will not be alone. And sure enough, there you go. There's another comment. I failed my proctored N10-007 exam for wearing a watch. For wearing a watch. Seriously? That doesn't, come on. This is now getting ridiculous. Now I'm studying for the N10-008. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that. But that's just one of these. They should have told you that, or at least given you, hey, you're wearing a watch, you need to throw it over there. I don't understand what this is. This is the pre-show camera. Now, when we do a live show, it'll be this. We'll be doing this in a moment. But right now, it's the pre-show. So this is what we're doing there. It was an analog watch. Hold on. Hold on. I would absolutely send them a note asking what in the world they're thinking. That an analog watch would be the issue. And I would work hard to get my my voucher back, to get another voucher for that one. There's no reason you should have to pay again for that. So, and keep me posted. Send me, just go to the top or bottom of the website, click the contact us link, and just keep me posted on how that's going. I'd like to know, show us your mouse. What? This is my mouse. It is enormous. It's kind of hard to see from that angle. Here's the mouse. So this is the mouse. It's big. I mean, I have a big hand. All right. So I can hit an octave plus a couple keys. So it's a big mouse. It's actually called the hand shoe is what it's called. It's enormous, but my whole hand goes on it. And I don't know if I told you this, I spend a lot of time at this desk. And that's what that's about. Keep me posted on the whole watch thing, analog watch thing. I'm very interested, and I want to know these things. Hey, it's top of the hour, everybody. 12 o'clock. Let's prep this thing. Give me a second. Let's go into... I got so wrapped up in the analog watch story that I forgot I was doing a live stream. Okay, here we go. Chat's still rolling, but video froze. Well, it's just you, because everything looks good on the video side. We are good to go. We are set. We've got things ready. It's now time to get a live stream going here. That's not the lower third. That's the video we want. Let's get this moved over. Here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2022 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is our N10-008 study group, where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you get to answer them live and in real time if you are here indeed watching the live show in real time. We, of course, if you're watching this on a replay, stick around. You can still follow along with us. There's plenty to go through. Do not worry about that. But if you are here live, you can answer these questions online using a service called Socrative. Socrative is this service. You can easily find it by popping open a new browser window and heading over to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link you want. That will take you directly to the Socrative front end where you can answer questions. There's already a question waiting for you, so you can try that right now. And then we've also got, of course, an app you can use. Of course we do. It's the Socrative Student app. That's the one you want to download from your favorite app store. And the room name, because it will ask you for a room name in that. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER, and that will get you to the questions and the answers that you will be able to choose from. If you've done all of those things correctly, there will be a question waiting for you that says, a network administrator has been asked to double bandwidth between core switches. Which of the following technologies would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be STP, lag, QoS, VLANs, jumbo frames? If you think you know the answer, please do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to this link that's on your page, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Just remember what you put in there. This is a question from last month. It's our only old question that you will see in this live stream. And this gives us a chance to get in, answer questions, make sure we're able to get in and leave a comment or leave your answer in the Socrative front end. It's very good. Yes, because people in the chat room are going, that sounds really familiar, because it is really familiar. So you knew it. You recognized it. You were there. We knew that's the case. We'll come back to that question in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We are not able to do live streams with active participation unless there's someone here to participate. So thank you so much for attending this live event. We, of course, have lots that we do throughout the week and month. We do tend to do a live stream every week on some type of topic. Sometimes, though, we're back here creating more content, and you're always welcome to keep an eye on what we're doing by subscribing to our YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube. We've got weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus. You'll find those at professormesser.com/Twitter, and a prettier version of it is at professormesser.com/Instagram. At least I think it's a little prettier because I put a nice picture along with it. So those are always fun. You'll not only see and they're in a view where you can swipe to the left to be able to see the question, then the answer, and then finally the picture that's there, and see what options we have available. Well, there's a lot. And by the way, once you do that, once you're subscribed to those things, then come back to the live stream where you can answer questions like the one we posed to you here. Now, as we were mentioning in the pre-show, there is a version of the Network Plus exam that was recently retired. It was the N10-007. It retired on June the 30th. So no more N10-007. There were a number of people in the chat room that got their certification done on the last day, which means you're now certified for 3 years. Congratulations. And you are now Network Plus certified. Now, if you are planning to start studying for the certification, or you didn't make it in time to finish your studies before the previous version was retired, then you're now studying the version that is called the N10-008. This is the latest and only version of the Network Plus exam available for English-speaking countries. So if you're, I'm assuming the people that are watching this are mostly attending from English-speaking countries, but that's not always the case. So make sure you check your particular country to see what options are available. You may still be able to take the N10-007 in your country, And for that reason, you may want to go back to my N10-007 study materials. The latest version, though, was released on September the 15th of 2021, so it's been out for a number of months now. We've also got an estimated retirement date. Since this was just released, we can estimate a retirement somewhere around March of 2025. What this really means as we sit here in July of 2022 is that you have plenty of time. Don't worry about having to worry through all of when is it going to retire? Am I going to be able to study in time? All of those things are fine. You got plenty of time. There's lots of ramp that is there. The only thing you have to make sure of is that all of your study materials are specifically written for the N10-008. Do not use 007 or other study materials to study for the Network Plus exam. Make sure all of your study materials clearly state that they are written for the N10-008. That's so important. So that's the real key. This is one of those situations where you can go through all of this and be able to work through what these requirements are. Speaking of requirements, I'm going to pop back to the 007 requirements real quick, because they tell us that the exam is 90 minutes long and you can have up to 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. And you need to score 720 on a scale from 100 to have some options there. Now, of course, we have our free course available on the internet. You can go to YouTube at any time. You can watch any of our Network Plus videos. The entire course is there. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's nothing you have to register for. You just go to YouTube and watch them. What could be easier? There are a number of folks that would prefer an offline version of these videos. They would like MP3 audio versions of the video content. Maybe they want my course notes. Maybe they would like my Exam Hacks ebook. All of these things are available and more in my N10-008 Network Plus Success Bundle. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. I'll also let you know that there are replays available of this live stream immediately afterwards on YouTube, and I also upload an audio podcast version to professormesser.com/podcast. It's a great way to go into the podcast listening program you use, add all of those streams for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and then they're automatically downloaded directly into your mobile device or whatever you're using to listen to podcasts. You'll find that at professormesser.com/podcast. Also want to let you know, I mentioned this earlier, is that there are timestamps in the YouTube video description that are usually put there about 24 hours after we do one of these events. If you are if you're someone who is watching and looking for those, you have to wait for my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay. Everybody say hi to Lori. Lori is in the replay. She's watching this probably at 2x speed and putting all of those timestamps down. And you can go back many, many months, in this case, many years, to be able to find timestamps on all of these. It's a great way to hunt down exactly what you're looking for in all of these. Keep an eye out for those, and it's available in a lot of our videos. We've also got a chat room. Of course we do, because we're not live streaming all the time. This isn't Twitch, although maybe I should have thought about that before we started things. Twitch would have been fun. But the way that we communicate when we're not doing live things is in the chat room. Feel free to join our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. And when I'm not in there, someone else is always in there to be able to answer questions, to study together, to talk about tips and tricks. It's a great place to get more information. Also, I'll let you know that eventually you will need to take your Network Plus exam. I don't know if you've thought this through yet. That's ultimately what you will have to do. But that means you have to purchase a voucher to be able to take this exam. You could certainly go to Pearson VUE and pay full price, or you can come to my website and pay less. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and you will find there are vouchers there for almost all of the CompTIA exams. I need to add Data Plus into this mix. I haven't added it because it would make it incongruent. Not something, there'd be too many on the top or the bottom. I'll figure it out. Data Plus needs to go in there too. So anything that is a CompTIA voucher is discounted on my site. You don't need a discount code. You don't need a coupon code. You don't have to add an extension into your browser. They're just already discounted. They just already have a lower price than what you would pay if you went to the Pearson VUE website. Not only do you get a discounted price, but I'll give you a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook absolutely free. This is my set of I call them exam hacks, kind of life hacks for studying and things you can do during the exam to perhaps get you a few extra points on the exam. Sometimes a few extra points is all you need. So very nice to have. You can find that, and it's included free at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's look at that question I posed earlier that you have already figured out. Oh yeah, we did this one last month. That's by design. So the one we did last month, this is the question that asks, a network administrator has been asked to double bandwidth between core switches. Which of the following technologies would be the best choice for this requirement? Is it STP, lag, QoS, VLANs, or jumbo frames? All real things. All are topics you should know from your Network Plus exam, but how did you answer? Let's find out. 40% of you say it's lag, L-A-G. 22% of you said jumbo frames would be the way to do that. 16% said QoS, 13% said STP, almost a tie there. And then in last place, VLANs with 8%. Well, our key here is that we want to double bandwidth between core switches, not double the efficiency of communication over an existing link. We need to double the bandwidth. And one of the best ways to double bandwidth, one of the really most common ways to double bandwidth, is to aggregate multiple links together and use multiple links as if they are one big link. We refer to that as link aggregation or lag. That is the idea behind that. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as port bonding. Sometimes you'll hear it as port aggregation. There's different names depending on the manufacturer, but most of us in the industry just tend to call it lag. Oh, we got a lag set up between those two switches. We're running 20 gig or we're running 4 gig or whatever it happens to be. This link aggregation really provides you with a way to make that happen. It uses by default, you can set it up as a static link, but there is a management protocol that is used between switches on occasion called LACP, the Link Aggregation Control Protocol. It's not always required to run link aggregation between switches, but it can help with the process and maintaining, especially if there are certain links that become disconnected or reconnected. It can maintain and make sure that all of those are up to date and working as expected. Link aggregation is what we were looking for. This is a really good example of link aggregation. These are two switches. These two switches we can connect with a single link. Maybe this is gigabit Ethernet, so a 1 gig link. But then you find you need more bandwidth between all of those. You can simply add additional links, which in a normal world, if you've been watching my videos, would create a massive loop. There would be a huge loop as information came down one connection, went back up the other connection, came down another connection, went back up the other connection. You would crash the network if you did this on a normal link. So what you have to do first is configure all 4 of these connections on this switch as a link aggregation link. And then the 4 different interfaces on the other switch you would configure for link aggregation so that finally when you plug these in, it recognizes this will not loop. It instead will aggregate traffic through all 4 of those. In the chat room, good question about, well, if you plug those in and you didn't configure it as link aggregation, would spanning tree protocol protect you? And a great callback to one of the answers on here for STP, the spanning tree protocol is, of course, the protocol that is used on switches to prevent a loop. And it absolutely would stop a loop in that scenario. If spanning tree was configured on all 4 of those interfaces and you plugged in links on all 4, only one would come up and work. All of the rest would be blocked thanks to spanning tree protocol. And is there a limit to how many interfaces can be configured with a link aggregation? Yes, there is. It depends on the switch. It depends on the manufacturer. You'll have to look at the documentation for your switch to see what options you have available, but it varies not only in the number of interfaces, but the types of interfaces. Make sure you have a look at those to know exactly what is supported on your switch. I have a relatively low-end switch. I have kind of a small office switch that is in my data center, which is really a closet that's right over here where I keep everything. That switch supports link aggregation. The NAS that I use, a Synology NAS, has 4 Ethernet connections on the back. It also supports link aggregation. So if I could set up 4 separate Ethernet connections from my NAS into my switch, I could send them all as one single link aggregated 4 gig connection. So that's That's how it would work. It works on so many different switches these days. That is our option, link aggregation. As we have already learned, it's not STP. It would not be jumbo frames. Jumbo frames would certainly improve efficiency of file transfers from one side of the network to the other because you're able to have much larger frames, but it doesn't double bandwidth between switches. You still have the limitation of the original amount of bandwidth. So if it's a 1 gig link, you may be able to use that 1 gig link more efficiently, but you're still tapped off at 1 gig. If you want additional bandwidth, then you will need to add additional connections and set them up as link aggregation. And the two we have not talked about, QoS, quality of service, can manage which applications have priority on the network, but it won't increase or double bandwidth between switches. And lastly, VLANs, the virtual local area networks, is a way to logically segment different switches, but it also does not provide us with any bandwidth efficiencies or changes between those. So that particular answer of lag is the right one. 46% of you ultimately got that one right. And that was our rewind question of the month. Now let's get a brand new question to go through. As many of you know who have watched this before, is that we have usually our first question that we just did was a rewind question, but then everything else is brand new. And the first brand new question we like to bring to you is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are a handful of questions you will get at the very beginning of your Network Plus exam. They are questions that can ask you a number of different ways. So it's not a multiple choice. It's instead a fill in the blank, or they put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function, or it's a drag and drop question, or you have to put things in order, or maybe you have to do matching. It's just a different way to ask the question. So easy to do. So I have for you a matching question, but for those of you that were here last week, I made the matching question too easily, where everything on the left matched to everything on the right. That's not usually what you see in a CompTIA exam. Normally in a CompTIA exam, let me go back to this in just a moment. Normally in a CompTIA exam, you see a very different view. It's one that's very similar to this. I'm going to need to move my head out of the way, aren't I? Because you can't see the entire question there. This is one of the problems with being live. We'll just edit and post. You'll never know it's there. This question asks you to match the command line tool to the function. I have 7 command line tools and 4 functions. So that is one that we need to work through. That means there will be some of these command line tools that are left over at the end that we don't use. This makes it much more difficult. You could get them all wrong. There's no way to get everything absolutely 100% right because unless you really know the answer, because these are in a sort of a different set, one set of 4 and one set of 7. Let's step through the 4 different descriptions especially for the people on the podcast. They are: determine the IP address of an FQDN. I should have said an FQDN. Identify a faulty router between 2 sites. List the IP addresses connecting to a service. And lastly, identify the source of a broadcast storm. And we need to match those 4 functions to one of these 7 options, being traceroute, telnet, TCP dump, ARP, netstat, hostname, and dig. Those are the 7 different commands. So we're going to have 3 left over at the end that we don't use. See if you can match them up. For those of you listening in on the podcast, we're dealing with traceroute, telnet, TCP dump, ARP, netstat, hostname, and dig. And the 4 different functions are: determine the IP address of an FQDN, identify the faulty router between 2 sites, list the IP addresses connecting to a service, and identify the source of a broadcast storm. Now, if you think you know the answers, please put the answers. Please don't answer in the chat room. You instead want to use the link that's right here at the bottom of your screen, professormesser.com/QA. If you think they're already in the right order, you would simply put 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and you're done. See how easy that was? That's one of those, I think, that can help you. Obviously, it's not 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. They're going to be a little bit different, but feel free to put in your answer right there on the page. Number of people locking in their answers. Here we go. Now you can lock in your answer. I do have to push the button on my side for you to lock in your answer. Whenever you start working through these questions, you will find some of them look very familiar. Some of them you may not recognize. On questions like this, you may be able to get rid of answers that you know are not correct. So you've at least got some options there to work through. See if you happen to know what they are as you go through all of these. I want to thank Too Chill in the chat room, which clearly is chill enough. With a $5 super chat. Thank you, Too Chill. Too Chill says, passed my A+ and said I would stop by and thank you. Well, you're welcome. I didn't really take your exam. You're the one that took it. Congratulations on taking your exam and passing it. Too Chill says, will you come out with practice exams on Net Plus? That sounds like a great idea. I should consider that. I should consider coming up with practice exams on Net Plus. That's something I should really consider. I have considered it. I would really like to make some practice exams in Net Plus. That would be really great, but I don't have anything to specifically announce, at least not yet. It's one of those where it's on a list, on a very, very big list of things, and I want to do something like that in the future. I just don't know when that will be yet. That would be fun, though. I think we need some Network Plus practice questions. I think that would be fun to do. And it would be a good thing to write. I'd love to write that book. So it's not for a lack of want, because I absolutely do want to do it. Everybody, I know, everybody wants the practice exams. I get your emails. I get your messages. I get your DMs. I hear you in the chat room. You're constantly telling me I would like some practice exams. So as soon as I am able to come up for air, as long as I'm able to get that on the calendar, or absolutely work through those. I hear you very loudly and very clearly. Thank you for the comment, and congratulations on your A+ certification. Too Chill. That's a good one. Let's see how you did with this question where we matched the command line tool to the function. A number of you have locked your answers in. You're having a hard time Googling this one. Stop Googling. Don't Google it. You're not going to find it anyway. So that's very useful if you're someone who's working on those. Can really help you out. Let's step through each one of these one at a time and see if we happen to know what they are. The first one was determine the IP address of an FQDN. The F in FQDN, we actually say the letters, so it would be an FQDN. This is one where if you're trying to figure out a fully qualified domain name, and what that IP address is of a fully qualified domain name, then you need to reference that on a domain name system server, a DNS server. That's what DNS does. It gives us an IP address once we give it the name that we're looking for. So you type in www.professormesser.com, and the DNS server gives you an IP address back of that particular service. That means you would need to use dig to be able to do that. That was option G. Dig is a utility that is able to query the DNS server, and it can absolutely help you determine the IP address of a fully qualified domain name. So dig was the right answer for question number 1. Number 2 asked, identify the faulty router between two sites. We've got a router on our side. We got a router somewhere else. Maybe it's on the internet or the other side of our network. There's a router somewhere else, and there's probably multiple routers in between. There certainly is on the internet. If you access professormesser.com, you probably step through a number of routers just to finally get to that particular subnet. So how can we identify a faulty router somewhere along that link, especially if it's in the middle because it's not on our local subnet? How would we know if that device was no longer responding? Well, you would know because you obviously ran a trace route. Trace route will show you every router along the way. And if you perform that trace route again and it doesn't complete, you'll be able to see how far you were able to get before the trace route timed out. That would give you at least some type of clue that right after we hit this router, something has gone horribly wrong. So that's a great tool to use. Trace route will tell you, well, I got as far as this router, but then I couldn't communicate any further. It must be something after that router. That might help you when troubleshooting because you can then avoid all of the other routes along the way. You can really focus your effort on everything after a certain point on the network, and traceroute is a great tool to do that. Next on our list, number 3, list the IP addresses connecting to a service. So let's say the service you're running, you have a web server, and you want to see all of the devices, IP addresses that are connecting to your web server. What's a good way to view that? There's a number of different ways to do this, but only one way in the list of commands that I provided to you, and that would be using the command netstat. Netstat to be able to do that. Netstat is network statistics. Netstat is a very, very capable program. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife because there's so many different things you can do with netstat. It is a very capable and very flexible utility. In fact, the more you learn about what's inside of some of these utilities, you find just how powerful they are. Netstat is one of those. It really gives you a lot of different options to be able to do that. This one is very, very useful for finding an IP address connecting to a service because it will list all of the inbound and, if necessary, the outbound communication to a particular service on your device, on your server, if you will. So netstat is the only option in our list of examples that would provide you with a way to see what IP addresses we're actually connecting to a service. And as I mentioned, there's tons of ways to do this. That's probably one of the easier ones. And the last commands we had on our list, identify the source of a broadcast storm. Broadcast storms aren't something we deal with a lot, but they do pop up from time to time. It's when there are one or many devices on the network that are sending a lot of broadcasts and are using up both bandwidth and resources on local machines. This is one of the reasons that we got rid of broadcasts and IPv6 because we got tired of dealing with broadcast storms. We wanted our communication to be much more efficient with IPv6, and we were successful in doing that. But of course, we still have a lot of IPv4 still stuck around. Identifying the source of a broadcast storm can be identified very easily looking at the packets. We need some type of packet gathering tool. We need a Wireshark, we need a command line Wireshark, or we need TCP dump. TCP dump is a command line utility that's able to capture and view packets either interactively or save them to a file. It's a very useful utility. I use it all the time. I'm a packet guy, so I really like to see what's happening on the network. So identifying the source of a broadcast storm can be very easily done using TCP dump. That's the way you would make that happen. Now, there were 3 other options here we did not choose. We did not choose Telnet. Telnet is a way to connect to the console of a remote device across the network. It commonly and perhaps infamously does not use any type of security on the network communication. There's no encryption built into that communication. So anything you type in between those 2 devices can be easily captured by somebody running TCP dump. There you go. We tie those together. So if somebody's running TCP dump and they see you telnet into a device, they'll see you typing in your username. They'll see you typing in your password and then hitting enter. So at that point, they have your login credentials because you didn't use a more encrypted form of terminal communication, such as Secure Shell or SSH. That's why we always tell you, do not use Telnet unless it's something that perhaps has no security concern, or is maybe that's your only choice. It's very rare to find that. Almost everything these days supports SSH, so do not use Telnet. You want to use Secure Shell or SSH. Another one that we did not use was ARP. ARP is the Address Resolution Protocol. It is also a command that you can run to view the results of Address Resolution Protocol queries that have been made on your network and show you all of the ARP responses that you have cached locally. Very useful. The ARP command is very common to use. One of the things we would commonly do would be to ping a device, then look at our ARP table to see what MAC address is now associated with that IP address. And then you can do other things with that. You can maybe perform a capture of traffic based on that MAC address. You can confirm that the MAC address you're seeing is the MAC address associated with the actual device. There's so many things you could do for this, but ARP is a great example of that. And the last one, we did not use hostname. Hostname, a great little utility to be able to see what device am I connected to right now. Give me the host name. That's all it does. It tells you the name of the host you're connected to. This is a Linux/Unix/Mac OS type command. But there's also hostname capabilities in Windows as well. That's one of those that transcends operating systems. So you can type in hostname, and it will tell you the name of the host. You may wonder, what? You don't remember the name of the host you connected to on your screen that's in front of you? The answer is no, we do not, because we never tend to connect to one device, do we? If you ever look at somebody's screen, they always have multiple telnets, multiple SSH, multiple terminal screens, or whatever they're doing. But let's say it's multiple SSH sessions all running. You could have 9 of them on the screen at one time, one to a switch, one to a router, one to a firewall, one to a server, and you're troubleshooting and you're performing trace routes and you're pinging and you're looking at configurations. And it's very easy all the time to be able to get confused about which machine is that one again? I don't remember. On the top left, was that the server or was that the switch? Type in host name. Boom. Oh, that's host. That's what that host name is. So it's a way to help you out and tell you which one of those devices you're currently connected to. Very useful utility. Can save you when you accidentally or perhaps almost accidentally type the wrong thing into the wrong window. You may want to confirm you're on the right host before typing in or pasting in one of these long commands, just to be able to make that happen. So this is one, all of these commands, by the way, you should absolutely know on your exam. These are just a subset of those you need to know. So make sure you're familiar with those. They will certainly be something that could pop up on your exam, and you need to be familiar not only with what the command is and what it stands for, but you should know how to use it. So that whole story we just went through on where you would use these commands, that's what you need to have available and ready to tell the exam whenever you sit down for it. That is our performance-based question of the month. Determining the IP address of a fully qualified domain name is DIG. Identifying a faulty router between 2 sites would be traceroute. Listing the IP addresses connecting to a service can be easily seen with netstat. And identifying the source of a broadcast storm is TCP dump. Those are the 4 we were looking for. Hopefully those were the 4 that you chose. That is our performance-based question of the month. And now let's go back to a multiple choice-based question and see how we do with this next one that asks the question: a technician is using an OTDR to troubleshoot a network link. Which of the following would describe this device? Is it determine the amount of light in a fiber, calculate a signal-to-noise ratio, view the signal voltage, create a rollover cable, or install an RJ45 connector? A technician is using an OTDR to troubleshoot a network link. Which of the following would describe this device? Would it determine the amount of light in a fiber, calculate a signal-to-noise ratio, view the signal voltage, create a rollover cable, or install an RJ45 connector? Now, one of these is really the best answer, but I would almost accept 2 answers with this one. I think there's another one here that I would almost say, yeah, that's legitimate too. So this may be one where you could win twice on this one. Even if you didn't get the primary one that I was initially thinking, maybe you got the second one that sort of snuck its way onto this list. If you think you know the answer, there's your link, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Please don't put answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll have to see how we do with this one. This is an important one for troubleshooting. So let's see how you do with remembering troubleshooting on your network and what you would use for these particular commands, these particular instances, the situation. We'll have to figure it out. A lot of people saying it's tricky. It's tricky. It is, as they say. We rock around. That's right. Is NS lookup the same as dig? Well, it's certainly comparable. It's certainly comparable to that. They do very similar things. In fact, the NS lookup is sort of the deprecated version. Dig is sort of the new, fancier version. Think of it that way. That's pretty much. You'll find that you may find a version of Linux you're running may not even have NS lookup. It may only have dig. And as I have a video that does describe how to install dig in Windows. So you've got that going for you too. Got some options because it's not quite run setup and it's done. There's some things you have to do a little bit more as you step through these. So Feel free to figure out what you think it might be. Let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a technician is using an OTDR to troubleshoot a network link. Which of the following would describe this device? What in the world is that device? Let's see if it is determine the amount of light in a fiber, calculate a signal to noise ratio, view the signal voltage, create a rollover cable, or install an RJ45 connector. How did you answer? We can see that 65% of you chose A, determine the amount of light in a fiber. 21% chose my not as good, but I would give you credit answer, which is calculate a signal to noise ratio. We'll figure that out in just a moment. 13% of you said view the signal voltage. 1% said install an RJ45 connector. And 0% said create a rollover cable. Nobody said rollover cables? We missed the rollover cable, don't we? So this was specifically talking about an OTDR. This is an optical time domain reflectometer. This is a quite an advanced device. This is not an OTDR that is here listed. I don't believe it is. I think that's just a cable tester that's here. Maybe there's some OTDR here. I see some different options that are available on the screen, but it's very similar in style and shape to have an OTDR. I've got some better pictures in the video that we did on this. You can do a lot of things with both a time domain reflectometer, a TDR, and the optical version of the TDR, which is obviously used for fiber connections. That's what the O is for, is the optical part of it. But you could determine how long the fiber happens to be or how long the cable is by using the TDR. You can identify when and where the cable might have been spliced. So you've got an option there to be able to work through it. You can identify the impedance on the cable, especially useful on copper networks. Any signal losses, and that might be from electrical signals on copper or light signals on an optical network. Very good for certifying a cable installation. If you're installing a new cable connection, you're going to want to see at the end of that, did we really get the fibers put in? Are they really able to send as much light as we need? We can certify that with an OTDR, and we can locate any copper or fiber breaks and where they are and how far down that line they happen to be. That is the beauty of an OTDR. Now, of all of these things, identifying things like how much light is coming through a connection, especially if you're certifying the cable installation, this would be very useful to be able to make that happen. So having some way to determine the amount of light that you're receiving on that fiber connection can be really, really, really useful. And 65% of you said, yep, that's what we would use the OTDR for. Are we getting enough light being sent through this connection? It's a great way to do it. Now, an OTDR could also provide you with a signal-to-noise ratio. This is ideally, there's probably, if you're testing a link, there's certainly some type of noise you're going to get on that link. It might be noise because of reflected light on an optical network. If it's a copper network, it could be noise from other devices. It could be noise inside the cable itself. The cable themselves create their own noise, and being able to understand the differences between the noise and how much actual signal is getting through the connection can be a very valuable statistic. To be able to gather that metric, you would normally use a cable tester. You don't need an OTDR to be able to determine the SNR, which is the abbreviation for signal to noise. That is one that can be really, really useful, especially in wireless networks, because there's so much noise you get off of a wireless network. Signal-to-noise ratio is used on many different network links. We'll have many different devices that can help you calculate it as well. So I would accept that as a function of an OTDR. I think that both A and B, I think, would qualify as a good question, a good answer. Maybe not the best question, maybe not the best author of this question. I'll have a long talk with this person after we're done. It's me. I'm the one who wrote this. View the signal voltage, because this is O in the OTDR. There's no voltage. It's all light. I guess we could convert that to some voltage value, but that's not really useful to us. Voltages on these network connections are primarily something you would want to see on the copper side. And usually you don't need to see voltage on the signal. Normally that is all interpreted as how much signal are we able to get through the connection, and the OTDR, the cable tester, is going to tell you that itself. So viewing signal voltage, not very useful. Normally you'd view signal voltage on things like maybe you've got a multimeter. That's a really good device to be able to view the signal voltage on a connection, but obviously not what we would be using here because we're using an OTDR. The only other answer here where we got some responses is answer E, install an RJ45 connector. We've done a lot of those. I've done a lot of those. The RJ45 connectors are commonly installed with a crimper. The crimper. Crimper is a great one to use, but it's not going to help you with an OTDR. OTDRs don't have crimpers in them, so they're not going to be able to reconnect or install an RJ45 connector onto a link. You'd have to have a crimper for that. And creating a rollover cable, well, you'd probably need a crimper for that. Another couple connections. Nobody went for that anyway. 0% answered that one. The best answer here, I'm going to say, is A and B. Determine the amount of light in a fiber and calculating an SNR is two very good ways that you could make use of an optical time domain reflectometer. Those would be the right answers, and that's what I would recommend as a good answer for this one. Let's do another one. I've got one here. What good is a network plus study group if you don't have a good question about the OSI model? And our next question asks, a security administrator has created a firewall rule to block all inbound TCP 3389 traffic. Which OSI layer would be associated with this firewall rule? Would it be layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, or layer 7? That's what we're going to do. Oh, maybe I should have had a subnetting question. Okay, erase this. We'll do a subnetting. No, we won't. We'll go with this one. A security administrator has created a firewall rule to block all inbound TCP 3389 traffic. Not a bad idea, by the way. Which OSI layer would be associated with this firewall rule? Would it be layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, or layer 7? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that's on your screen, and lock in your answer. That's the way we do it. No subnetting. I don't tend to do subnetting on these live streams anyway. They tend to be very involved. So that would not be the case. Does this have two answers? No, this one definitively has a single answer associated with it. So this is one that you could only reasonably choose one. There's no way this one fits into another. It doesn't even ask what the best answer would be because there's just one answer on this one. So that's my only hint, is you got to lock one in, and it's got to be it. You got to have this. There was somebody I was talking to this week that said they were studying the TCP/IP model, which we don't use really in the industry. The only time I've ever seen the TCP/IP model used is in courses like this one. That's the only time it's used. It's one of these technical things that for some reason organizations continue to teach and has no connection to the real world because we don't use the IP model in the real world. We use the OSI model when we're talking to other networking professionals. So that's why you see us all talking about OSI on Network Plus, and people will send me notes from time to time that I have a question about the IP model, or why aren't you talking more about the TCP/IP model? Because we use TCP/IP, so obviously we use the TCP/IP model. No, it's the opposite. Once upon a time there was an OSI protocol. This model was based on the OSI protocol. There was also a model based on TCP/IP because there was a TCP/IP protocol. So what did we do? We stopped using the OSI protocol, but we kept the OSI model. We kept using the TCP/IP protocol suite, but we got rid of the TCP/IP model. So there you go. That's how it usually works for us. That's usually when we run into this. Just another weird example of the way this industry works sometimes is it works through those. Let's see how we do. A lot of you have locked in your answer for this one, so let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a security administrator has created a firewall rule to block all inbound TCP 3389 traffic. Which OSI layer would be associated with this firewall rule? Would it be layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, or layer 7? How did we answer? 56% of us, we have a majority, say it's layer 4 is the OSI layer associated with this. 28% of you say it's layer 3 because it's a firewall. We'll talk about that in a moment. We have 11% that say it's layer 7 because 7's a nice number. And 11% of you say it's so nice, we're going to choose that one. And then we have a tie, two-way tie for last place, with 2% saying layer 1 and 3% saying layer 2. There is only one answer with this one. It is definitively an OSI layer 4 situation. This is one we are putting into the firewall to block traffic based on a port number, based on TCP 3389. A port number is what we are using there. And because we're using a port number that is a TCP or UDP port number, then this refers specifically to the transport layer of the OSI model, or OSI layer 4. So that is one where it's very, very directed. This question is very specific because we were blocking a very specific TCP port number, specifically TCP port 3389. Well, that's not at first, it's not a signal going across the wire, so it's not layer 1. This is not a MAC address or some other layer 2 address. Sometimes layer 2 addresses, especially on a wide area network, some wide area networks don't have MAC addresses. They might have a DCE or DTE, or they might have an old school frame relay. We had DLCIs. So depending on the media that you're using or the topology that you're using, you may have a different type of layer 2 address. On Ethernet and wireless and pretty much any network that you might use, most of the time those are MAC addresses. So layer 2 is referring to a MAC address. If we were filtering traffic based on a particular MAC address, it would be layer 2. If we were filtering traffic based on an IP address or an IP address range, then we would be at layer 3. Layer 3 being the network layer of the OSI model. Anytime you see that there is a router, there's somebody communicating over a particular IP address, we're filtering traffic based on an IP address, all of those are the layer 3 side of the OSI model. So anytime you see IP address, you should automatically think layer 3. Anytime you see a MAC address, you should automatically think layer 2. So if somebody says, oh, I think our problem here is a layer 3 problem, then it's something relating to a MAC address, a subnet mask, a routing table, something that deals with getting traffic between two different devices at the IP address level. This particular question, though, asked to filter traffic based on a TCP port number, specifically TCP 3389. So this TCP port number, because we're filtering based on TCP, which could be sent across the network from any IP address to any IP address, we're now at a higher layer than the IP addresses. So it's higher than layer 3. Anything dealing with port numbers, especially TCP or UDP, fit very nicely into layer 4, the transport layer. And that is indeed what most everybody answered with this one. The transport layer, at any time, if you see anything talking about a TCP protocol or port number or a UDP protocol or port number, it's always going to be layer 4. That's where we fit those in. Now, there are other protocols that can certainly fit at layer 4, but these days on most of our networks, those are the two you're going to find, is TCP and UDP. The last one on our list was layer 7. If this was an application, if we were going into the firewall and we were telling the firewall, block all traffic that is RDP traffic, remote desktop protocol traffic, that would be a layer 7 type of firewall rule. You'd obviously need a next generation firewall for something like that. So this layer 7 is where you're just blocking it based on the name of the app, which means it doesn't matter what port number the app is using. It doesn't matter what IP addresses the app is using. It doesn't matter what MAC addresses this app is communicating between. If we see any traffic that is RDP traffic, block it. Well, that's a layer 7 firewall rule, and very common to use on today's modern next generation firewalls. Works very nicely. So those are the differences between those. And in this particular case, layer 4 is what we were looking for because we specifically chose TCP 3389. That is what we would use. Now, why? A number of different questions in the chat room, a number of different things in the chat room. Neef in the chat room with a $4.99 super chat, which you don't need to necessarily super chat to ask a question, but maybe we should. Maybe actually, I take that back. You must do it. No, you don't have to do a super chat to ask a question. But why isn't this layer 5, layer 6, or even layer 7 if it's remote desktop protocol? Well, because for this example, RDP is not listed here. In fact, the traffic that's going between these devices may not actually be RDP traffic. I know that very commonly when we communicate via remote desktop protocol, it almost always uses TCP 3389. But these are just numbers that we associate with a particular protocol. It's just a label, but we don't have to use these port numbers. We could configure RDP to communicate over TCP port 80. We could configure RDP to communicate over TCP port 743. We just pick a number. It doesn't matter. That's just a number that we have all agreed that it is commonly associated with RDP. So we aren't setting up a session at this point. We aren't communicating between two devices at this point. We aren't determining if a session is active, and then if it's active, we're getting rid of it. Nope. We're just blocking everything based on a very specific port number, and port numbers are always associated with OSI layer 4, the transport layer. It's exactly the way you would do that. Now, this is a very good example of when you're configuring a firewall rule or a filter, where you set the filter is going to determine what OSI layer is active for that particular rule. So it's a good one to think about when you work through those pieces. So that's why it would not be layer 5, it would not be layer 6, and it would not be layer 7, or really anything but layer 4. We're blocking based on a port number, period, end of story. Nothing else is happening at that point. Therefore, everything goes up to the layer 4, and at that point, we block the traffic and we're done with it. Very common to do on a firewall. And it's you'll still find lots of firewalls that are layer 3, layer 4 types of firewalls, especially if it is not a next generation firewall. Layer 4 is where you would go with that one. Before we go to the next question, I will say that King in the chat room with $5 super chat is taking an A+ 40-hour class. I haven't learned much. Well, you've got another, I guess, 38 hours to go. They're just rushing every subject. I can't take notes. If it's a 40-hour A+ course, I'm surprised that they're even able to talk normally, that they're not having to maybe connect your minds directly together, because there's so much information on an A+ exam or Network Plus or Security Plus. There's no way a 40-hour class could ever cover everything. We talked about boot camps in the last study group, and I don't speak very highly of boot camps because of this problem. It's a physics problem. It's a time motion issue. You can't cram all of the things you need to know into such a small time frame and expect on the other side to come out of this. So what I would highly recommend you do is immediately reset in your mind the purpose of the class that you're taking. I know this, we're going into the after show here just a little bit, but since we have the super chat up, I would absolutely recommend that you get as much information down as you can. You're drinking from a fire hose. Most of this is going to end up on the floor. You're going to be able to drink a little bit, though. So drink down everything you can. Copy down all the notes you can. At the end of this, you're going to have to go back and do more studying. Boot camps are not going to help you learn everything you need to know for an exam. So we can talk more about that in the after show. That's absolutely what I would recommend with this. This is a really good example, though. We've already talked during this live stream about so many different topics. We've talked about OTDRs and different tools. We have talked about working through challenges with getting different devices working. We've talked about the OSI layer. We've talked about fiber, but we haven't talked about encryption yet. We haven't talked about wireless. We haven't talked about proxies. There's things we haven't talked about, but all of this is in my videos. So you would, of course, need to go to my video series to see everything that's there. but look at how many videos it is. 93 videos for Network Plus, 14 hours of content. That's a lot of content. So what I did was take everything from my videos and I put them into one single document. These are my course notes for the N10-008. There are 75 pages of content that has all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the different views that you would find, all the different tables, anything that's in my video that is important, and even everything that is in my video that is written down is in the set of course notes. They are extensive. They have everything inside of them, and there are both physical and digital versions. The physical version is exactly the same as the digital version. It's just in real world type printed dead tree format, but it is in full color, and it is bound, perfect bound, and we will ship it to you. And if you get the physical version, you get the digital version for free. It's a great way to do that. But the digital version has tons of info. It's a great way to have all of the information that you've been studying so hard in these videos all wrapped up into one single document. Have a look at it. You can find it at professormesser.com/NPCN for the Network Plus course notes. That would be a great place to go. Since we're talking about published information for Network Plus, Dan in the chat room with $5 Super Chat says, I'd really love some Network Plus practice exams. Where have we heard this before? The A+ ones were probably one of the best study tools I had. Well, first, thank you for that, Dan. We work very, very hard at getting content that is so specific to the exam that you're taking. We want it to be laser focused on the things you need to know. And I think we accomplished that with both of our A+ study practice exam books and our Security Plus practice exam book. There's only one course left that would need a set of practice exams. What would it be? I hear you, Dan. Thank you for the super chat. If nothing, it encourages me to hurry through this and get more practice exams done, especially for Network Plus. I hear you, and thank you for the comments on the A+. That just does nothing but encourage me. Thank you, Dan. And thank you for the $5 super chat. Let's do another question. A network administrator has configured a single wireless network to extend across multiple access points in a single building. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it 802.1q, WPA3, MAC filtering, MU-MIMO, or ESSID? A network administrator has configured a single wireless network to extend across multiple access points in a single building. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it 802.1q, WPA3, MAC filtering, MU-MIMO, or ESSID? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. That is the one we need to figure out. All of those terms, they look like a bunch of jumbled letters and numbers, but they are all real things. So and all of them, by the way, are part of the N10-008 exam objectives. So if you're looking at any of these answers and you're thinking, I don't even know what that is. I don't know, 802.1q. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Write that one down and go back so that you can study a little bit more on that particular topic, because this question may be about that topic or may not be about that topic, but the question in your exam could very well be on that topic. So feel free to go through this and figure out what this might be. See if you can figure out all of these. This would be a good one to go through if you're ever working through problems. This is one you could absolutely run into in anybody's workplace. You may even be setting this up in your workplace to work this way. So we see if you happen to know what it is. See if you can lock in the answer. I'm really interested in seeing what you think this one might be by going through all of those. So Cameron in the chat room, you passed your N10-007, but you forgot what 802.1q was. So you think that's a problem for you. What about me? I have to remember what all of these are. Now, fortunately, I've worked on networks where I've used 802.1q. I've got a WPA3 network here. I have done MAC filtering before. I absolutely take advantage of MU-MIMO, and I've worked on networks. In fact, I have a network that has an ESSID. So gosh, all of these. I don't know if I gave anything away there or not. I don't think I did. But I have worked with all of these technologies at one time or another. You probably will as well if you haven't already. I would bet on your network you probably might have one or even two of these already running on your network. See what you think it is, and figure out what those happen to be. See how you work through all of those. There's a lot of different options available for these, but maybe you can work through what you think it is. So let's see how you answered this one. See, everybody had their answer locked in, so I could give a little bit more intel on this one for those of you that were still sitting around. The question asked, a network administrator has configured a single wireless network to extend across multiple access points in a single building. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it 802.1q, WPA3, MAC filtering, MU-MIMO, or ESSID? We did not get a majority on this one. We did not get a 50% on this one. We got close, though. I guess we could say that ESSID probably gets pretty close to what this happens to be. But is that the right answer? 47% of you say it's ESSID. We'll find out in a moment. Because 29% of you, almost a third of you, say it's MU-MIMO, multi-user MIMO, to be specific. 15% of you said 802.1q, maybe because I said 802.1q a million times. 9% of you said WPA3. 0% said MAC filtering. So this is a very common scenario when you have a network, especially a larger corporate network, where you have a big building. Maybe the building spans from one side to the other. There's so much there that you would work through. So I think certainly this is something we need to know about. But it's nice if you have multiple access points to cover such a large building. You don't want to have to keep logging into the wireless network when you leave one part of the network and go to another part of the network. So it would be nice if you could share the same name of the wireless network, but be able to move seamlessly between access points. And we can do that by taking advantage of an ESSID. This is the way it works. You've got your wireless access point controller, or switch that we're connecting to. So you've got a switch up here at the top that connects multiple access points. We have an access point here that has a specific BSSID. That's effectively the MAC address of the network. That MAC address configuration you can see is different on the other access point because that's the way MAC addresses work. Each device has its own unique media access control address. We've also noticed that even though the BSSID is different between those two, that we have the same SSID between both of these. Both of the SSIDs on these networks are SGC1 and SGC1. Well, we're on our mobile phone down here. It's time to upgrade, by the way, but there's our mobile phone. And we're on this network that has a particular BSSID, and we're walking through the building, and now we're moving out of the range of one access point and into the range of another access point. And when that happens, we're going to reestablish connection to the wireless access point that has the same name, the same configuration. But now we were able to seamlessly move between those. We're able to do that because we had configured both of those to be a single ESSID, or Extended Service Set Identifier. This is not roaming. Roaming is a term used on a cellular network. This is ESSID, an Extended Service Set ID, which effectively is just saying we're going to set up all of our access points with the same SSID and the same configuration so that we can then move from one to the other seamlessly. As we're walking through the building, we walk on one end of the building, we walk to the other end of the building. We still have wireless connectivity, but we moved maybe between multiple access points while we were walking through the building, or between buildings, or on a campus. You can make this as big as you'd like. You could have many, many different access points thanks to ESSID. That is the technology we were looking for when you have a single wireless network extending across multiple access points in a single building, or single area, or single campus, or single logical area. Yes, this would be great for hospitals. This would be great for stadiums. This would be great for college campuses. This would be great for large enterprises. Very, very useful to be able to do that. It would not be 802.1q, which would be a tagging function, be able to have VLANs communicate across physical switches using an 802.1q or an Ethernet trunk. It's another good term for .1q. We often are very cool in how we describe this. We don't ever call it, have you set up an 802.1q trunk? No, we simply say, is that connected with .1q? Yeah, all right. That's all we do. We just call it .1q because we're cool like that. WPA3 is an encryption technology very commonly used on wireless networks. So if you have a brand new wireless network, then it probably is able to take advantage of the newer WPA3. If you have the older wireless network, it might be WPA2. Both are very good. WPA3 a little bit better. On a corporate network, they're about the same. There are differences and improvements in the encryption type and some of the things used behind the scenes. At your home, there's actually a larger difference. It's actually much better or more better, somewhat better, to have a WPA3 network instead of WPA2, especially if you're using a shared passphrase between all of those. We can refer back to the videos for more info on that. We've got 29% of users that said multi-user MIMO, the multiple input, multiple output between multiple users, which is very commonly used on wireless networks today, especially the newer flavor of networks, the AC and the AX networks. The multi-user MIMO allows you to send information simultaneously on the same frequency to multiple users. How does that work? Well, we explain it in the video to some degree, but it's quite the physics that takes place that allows us to have different types of data sent over the same network at the same time to different people. Without multi-user MIMO, our wireless networks would be much slower than they are today. We're able to get quite a bit of speed increase, especially with multiple users, with multi-user MIMO. And if you have a lot of wireless network users in your home, there's people streaming to multiple televisions constantly, and you're thinking, oh, there's just not the response time I'm expecting on this network, you may need to upgrade your wireless network to one that can support multi-user MIMO. You have a look at that. As long as your devices also support multi-user MIMO, that might improve things for you. And lastly, nobody chose this one, MAC filtering. Certainly a good way to limit access of certain devices onto your network, but it is more of an administrative type access. MAC filtering, very useful for that, but in this case, MAC filtering doesn't provide multiple access points in the same network in a single building. That's not what it's for, and of course, 0% if you thought that was the case anyway. I know we're sort of past the top of the hour, but I will let you know that if you're watching this for continuing education unit credit, you can earn 1 hour of a webinar category CEU by following these instructions, and you must follow these instructions to earn the CEU. If you do not follow these instructions, your message gets deleted. You will not earn the CEU, so make sure you follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. On the form that pops up, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put July 2022 Network Plus, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, nothing else around it, not part of a sentence, not hidden somewhere in a long paragraph, on a line by itself, preferably at the very top, put the super secret code word of the month, ESSID. ESSID is the super secret code word of the month. Send that to me. You can also put anything else you'd like in that message. I will be more than happy to look through that, figure out the details. How many webinar CEUs can you use? It depends on the version of the exam that you need to renew. For Network Plus, I want to say it's 5. I want to say that's you need like 30 or 20, 25 to renew, 20 to 25, somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and in the process of doing that, I'm telling you the wrong information. But it's somewhere in there, but you can only collect about 5 of those, I think it is. Somebody in the chat room will confirm me and tell me I'm wrong, and they'll give us the right information, and then we'll all be set right. See how these live streams work? So stick around for about 60 seconds, and we'll have really the right answer for you. But that means that you'll have to do some other things. If you're collecting CEUs, you'll need to collect CEUs from other types of functions, events, and things. It can't be a webinar. So it would be great if you could just go back over all my videos, watch all the videos. You have everything you need for CEUs. No, you can't. Can't do that. So a number of you have decided you just don't want to even gather CEUs. You just want to take the CertMaster CE, which I got to tell you is pretty appealing. You just pay one price. You don't have to go collect CEUs. You don't have to count them. You don't have to submit them. You don't have to worry that you have enough. You just take this one online course, and you can take it until you get it all right. And when you finally get it all right, you're upgraded for 3 years. It takes a few hours. That's the way to do it. That's the CertMaster CE. That's my way of doing it. That's more of the lazy person's way of doing it. But it works so well. I don't know if it's lazy. It's efficient. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. It's just so much faster and easier to do it that way. And if you're down to the wire for CertMaster CE, you can be on your final day and you're wondering, how am I ever going to collect CEUs on this final day? You aren't. Just go do CertMaster CE and it's done. That's the way to make it happen. Now, I know it's top of the hour. I've kind of been talking a lot on this one. So we're going to do one more question, because why wouldn't we? Of course we are. This next question asks, a network team is recovering from a disaster at a remote data center that contains a duplicate of all company hardware and data. Which of the following would best describe this center? Is it public cloud, hot site, MSP, tabletop exercise, or load balancer? A network team is recovering from a disaster at a remote data center that contains a duplicate of all company hardware and data. Which of the following would best describe this center? Is it public cloud, hot site, MSP, tabletop exercise, load balancer? Which one is it? If you think you know the answer, there's the answer link right there. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. If you think you know the answer, follow that link on your screen. professormesser.com/QA. Great way to do it. So the folks that are working, that are filling me in, that are correcting me, as they should for this, 30 CEUs are required, 30. More than 29, less than 31 are required to earn your Network Plus renewal if you are collecting CEUs. There's many different ways to renew your certification. You could take a higher level certification. You could take a third-party certification. You could take CertMaster CE, which is effectively a number of different ways to do that. But CertMaster CE is the one we were speaking of earlier, where you simply take a test. You take an exam. Take the CertMaster CE, and then you're now renewed for 3 years. So useful to have that there. So that's where I don't even know what's going on there, but I think you were trying to tell me how many different CEUs are required for these different certifications, but it's close enough. We know that Network Plus is 30. That's the focus. Now, for the question we did not get an answer to is how many webinar category CEUs are allowed to be used in a 3-year renewal period for Network Plus. I think it's 5. I think in A+ it was 3. So how many webinar category CEUs can you apply towards that renewal? If you need 30 CEUs, how many of them can be webinars? I think I asked that now 4 times. So that is how we work through it to figure out the answers for that. It's got to be one of those, right? I think it's 5. I'm going with 5. Going with 5 as the number of CEUs, the maximum number of webinar category CEUs that can be accumulated in a single 3-year renewal period. I think it's 5. We'll see if somebody tells me I'm right or wrong. Either way, I'm fine with it, by the way. How many webinar CEUs for Security Plus? I think it's 10. Or maybe it's less. I think it's 10. Is it 6 for webinar category CEU for Network Plus? That's a weird number, but maybe it is. I don't know. I thought I had this. I thought I had a slide on this. Did I just hide the slide? Is the slide hide? I don't have a slide on this. I've removed it from my link. It was one less thing to talk about at the beginning of the study group. So I just don't have it. Sorry about that. It's not there. Can't help you. 6 for Network Plus, 10 for Security Plus. So I got the Security Plus right. I was close. It was not 5. It was 6. Thank you, Syed, for telling me I'm wrong. And I'm fine with that. I get told I'm wrong all the time. I'm a married man. I'm wrong often. So I'm fine with that. 6 for Network Plus, 10 for Security Plus. That works for me. Thank you for looking that up, by the way, Zayed. It's one of those, it's hard for me to do that. We're on a live stream. Let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a network team is recovering from a disaster at a remote data center that contains a duplicate of all company hardware and data. Which of the following would best describe this center? Is it public cloud, hot site, MSP, tabletop exercise, or load balancer? And what did you think it was? Let's click this. It's hot ones. It's 87% say hot site is what you would choose for this one. But is it really? We got single digits for everything else. 7% for public cloud. I thought everything was public cloud. 4% for MSP. 2% for load balancer. 0% for tabletop exercise. I'm so sorry, tabletop exercise, that didn't work out as we expected. We can probably write you off that list, but if you have an exact duplicate of all of your hardware, you have an exact duplicate of all of your data, and it's just sitting there at another site, we refer to that as a hot site. Hot site is what that is. And it's hot because we can walk in the door and immediately we're up and running. We don't have to restore anything. We don't have to bring tapes with us. We don't have to have another set of hardware brought in. We have everything sitting there ready to go. This seems like it would not be common, but in fact, it's more common than you might think. Imagine a company that makes, in a single year, they make $1 billion. This is not unusual. $1 billion is a lot of money, but they take in the total amount of money they take in, perhaps not their profit, but perhaps their revenue that they bring in, total sales of $1 billion. And they've already calculated if they're down for a week, think of how many millions of dollars they have lost. So what they do is they create in their minds, how can we fix that? How can we have it so that we would never be down? So that would not happen. Well, what if we got a duplicate of everything? We put it at a remote site. We set up a big fat network connection between the two so we can constantly update the data. And then we create a set of parameters that we can effectively flip a switch. We can go through a set of processes that move us from our primary data center to our hot site. And there's a lot of money on the table, like perfect example, right? Mine in the chat room, banks, financial institutions, anybody who's got a lot of money on the line. This is a great option for them because they can spend relatively little money on duplicating all the hardware and duplicating software and duplicating data and have it all ready to go if they ever need it. And if you do the math, you might only need to use it once every 10 years, but you might find it pays for itself immediately. So that's your business proposal. That's the reason we have this. And as someone who was a systems engineer for Next Generation Firewall Company, these were some of my favorite customers because they would evaluate the product. They would see if it was the right fit for them. We would answer questions about the ability of this product to work. And we would say, well, on your network, you need 2 of these for your internet connection, one that's a primary and one that's a standby, or maybe it was an active-active config, so both firewalls were active at the same time. They go, that sounds great. That's the perfect design for our network, is to have 2 of those on the internet connection. We'll take 4. So they already knew they were going to double the number that they needed because they were going to take 2 of those and move it off to a remote hot site. Now, in many cases, if you're in this situation with a vendor and you need duplicates that will only be used if it is a disaster situation, you can very often ask for a special license for this product that brings the cost way down, but it's only to be used in the case of an emergency. So it's in reality, you aren't really paying for 2. You're really paying for 1.5. So you get a little bit of a break in most cases. That's not always the case, but that was the way it worked for the company I worked for. Because why would you pay full price for something that you would rarely, if ever, end up using? So it makes sense. for that. And that's the scenario for hot sites. That's where you would do it. It has all of your hardware. It has all of your data. It's all there. You flip the switch. It's never that easy. But you go through the process of moving from one site to the other, and you're up and running. So you might be down for a certain amount of time, but much less than weeks at a time. And that's where the real financial benefit is. And of course, you knew that. 88% of you said, yeah, hot site. That's exactly what I would choose. That is where we would go to be able to have these up and running. That's what I would select, and that is the right answer. Click that button, and you're now moved over to the hot site to be able to make that happen. Let's see. I know we're well past the top of the hour, but I will remind you that all of the questions we went through today come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you get your copy of these objectives. They tell you everything you need to know for the exam. And as I was telling someone yesterday, if you know everything that's listed in this free document from CompTIA that you can find a link to at professormesser.com/objectives, if you know everything that's in that document, you're going to pass your exam. It's not even a question. You'll easily walk through this exam if you know everything that's listed in this document. That's how valuable this document is. Make sure you get your hand on these objectives. It should be the first thing you read through before you start your studies. It should be the last thing you reference as a checklist before you walk into your exam, just to make sure you've studied everything. You can find a link to that at professormesser.com/objectives, or go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to them. Valuable document. We do one of these Network Plus study groups once a month. We also do other study groups throughout the month. We do another Network Plus study group on August the 17th. That's the plan. So come on back on August. Is a weird month. You can see I've got A+ on the 2nd and the 4th, and then there's kind of a gap in time. Things happen. I don't know. Something's going on then. I don't control my schedule, people. This is how it goes. This is when I'm told I can't go live, is this week. And then on the 17th, we're back. It's okay. We're back on the 17th. So the 17th is currently when the next Network Plus study group is set. On August the 24th is the Security Plus study group for next month. We also have a Security Plus study group next week. So we've got a couple coming up pretty quick. Would not be vacation. No, this would not be that time. But there is an opportunity there next month to stop back by, and we'll do another one of these Network Plus study groups. They're such fun. That date might change. It could change. These things can always change. But if it does, I will update the calendar immediately. So this is on this date and time. This is what it's set to. But if you're ever wondering, you can always go to the events calendar by going to professormesser.com/calendar, or follow the calendar link at the top of the site. Well, that takes us to the end of the questions today, but we have more to talk about. I'm going to take questions from you next in our after show. Stick around for that. Don't forget about the Network Plus Success Bundle at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Our discounted exam vouchers are available at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, don't forget that when we're not here, we're always doing something. You'll find us on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram. Simply type in professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Instagram, or just wherever you'd like to find me, /LinkedIn/Facebook. I've got accounts there anyway. You can certainly find out what's going on there. And if you're there, I'd like to be there too. So let me know if you don't find me somewhere, and I'll make an account, and we'll be there as well. Stick around for the after show. We got a lot more going on. Thanks for being here in this first hour. Thanks for your time, and thanks for answering those questions. And the chat room is just fantastic as always. Stick around for the after show. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Do I have a link to Twitch? I might. I don't know exactly. I do have a Twitch channel that I have never put any content on. It's really what I use to watch other Twitch providers. So I follow a lot of people on Twitch, but I don't broadcast anything on Twitch. So no, that's a good point to have this. Hope this is a question you can answer. Oh, we're going to do this next. So this is a good question. Thank you, Michael, in the chat room. We're going to talk about internet connectivity and the options that are available in just a moment. I need to change over my graphics so that you know how to ask me a question in the after show. There it is. So the questions in the after show, you can find them on my website at professormesser.com/live. If you're watching on YouTube, you don't have to go anywhere. It's the YouTube chat. I've just taken the YouTube chat and I've embedded the YouTube chat right there into the page at professormesser.com/live. So I'm looking at everything that's there. If you would like to ask a question, just put it into the chat room. I'm taking questions from the chat room, and we're going to hang out for a while and answer your questions. We're sort of turning everything around. So instead of me asking you the questions, let's have you ask me a few. And we've had a few extra questions come in. So we'll talk about this. A few that I'll do very quickly are, one of them asked, do my discount vouchers include a retake? Currently, the only place you can technically get a single voucher that provides you with a retake option is on the CompTIA website. That's the only place you can find them, in the CompTIA store. So I don't offer vouchers with retakes because CompTIA doesn't allow me that option. They don't give me that option to be able to provide a single voucher that has a retake. If you've seen these before, the retake costs more money to add on to the voucher. So that's really the thing you need to keep track of, is if you pass the first time, then you paid too much money because you're never going to use that retake voucher. That's kind of the problem. So that's something to think about as you are planning your vouchers, is that the vouchers on my site are for a single sitting for an exam. If you pass the exam, then you've passed. You don't need another voucher. If you don't pass the exam, you'll need another voucher to take the exam again. So for better or worse, that's what it is. And good point, Zayed. You make a very good point. If you are in college in the U.S., I want to say in Canada too, but I know certainly in the U.S., if you go to professormesser.com/vouchers, you'll notice at the top of the page, I don't know why I'm explaining it and not showing it because I have a computer in front of me that I can do this with. If you go to the vouchers page, at the very top of the page, discount CompTIA exam vouchers from Professor Messer. Before you do anything, I tell you, if you are a college student, you can purchase vouchers at the academic CompTIA store. There's a link right there that takes you to the store. Because the vouchers on the CompTIA store are discounted by like 50%. They're ridiculous. But you have to be a college student. They will confirm your studies. They will confirm you're an active college student. They aren't looking for an EDU email address or whatever nonsense that is. You have to be a college student to take advantage of that. If you are not a college student, you can continue. But I make sure that everybody is aware of that, so that because there's such great discounts. And if you're a college student, you don't have any money anyway. So get the cheaper voucher if at all possible. It is specific to college students currently. It is not for K through 12 high school or students who are not in college. So that's the thing. If you have not used your vouchers from CompTIA and you've purchased vouchers, well, you may at least want to reach out to them and see if they'll take those back. Explain to them what it is. I don't know that they will or not, but it's worth an example. But if you're not in college, you can't use them. So you don't have a choice. You have to buy at least maybe you could buy the discounted vouchers for that. So that's my recommendation for those. Other questions that came in, I'm coming back to the one on bandwidth in just a moment and network connectivity. We'll talk about that too in a moment. The other question I saw go by, we talked about retakes. We talked about discounts. Will I have a CertMaster CE discount? If you've been to my website, you know my recommended study materials include CertMaster Learn, CertMaster Practice, CertMaster Labs, a lot of great CertMaster products that are in there from CompTIA. CompTIA does not provide me with a way to give you or provide a discount for CertMaster CE. The only way to get CertMaster CE is directly from CompTIA. That's the way it is currently anyway. So I don't have a CertMaster CE discount because, to my knowledge, there is no CertMaster CE discount to be had for whatever reason. I don't know. I have no idea. But that's the current situation, just so you're aware. Not one on there currently. All right, let's talk about network speeds from internet service providers. This is a question from Michael in the chat room. How come some ISPs, like AT&T and others, have a symmetric upload/download speed, but Xfinity from Comcast does not? This is so true. Let's go to the Xfinity website. I noticed that lately they have stopped promoting or explaining what the differences are between upload and download speeds. Have you noticed this in some of these websites? Is they don't tell you what the differences are. They just tell you what the total bandwidth is that you'll get download. In fact, I think I had to call them last time to see what it happens to be. And in fact, I'm on the Xfinity website, and I'll give you an example of this. They promote a website. You can get 200 megabits per second. You can get 400 megabits per second. You can get 800 megabits per second. You can get 1.2 gigabits per second if you want. But notice they don't tell you what the download speed is, because there is a difference in our upload speed. They tell you the download, which is 1200 or 800 or 400 or whatever you're purchasing there from Xfinity, but they don't tell you that the speed upload is significantly slower. So here in my studio, for example, I have 500 megabit download speed. And I could have upgraded to 1 gig download speed if I wanted to. I just don't have that much downloading that I'm doing. So I didn't upgrade to 1 gig. But I had to call them and say, okay, that's the download speed. How much upload speed do I have? And they said, 25 megabits. So I can download at 500 megabits, but I can only upload at 25. So this is important for me because right now I'm uploading quite a bit of information to YouTube right now, so you're able to watch this video. This is also the same scenario if you are on a DSL network, because my Xfinity connection is cable modem. DSL, a similar issue where you can have a certain download speed on DSL, but a dramatically slower upload speed. Now, you would think the reason for this might be related to managing bandwidth. And to some degree, that's probably an aspect of it. But the problem is noise. The problem is, it's another physics problem. Of course, it's a physics problem. So the physics issue here is, let's take the example of DSL because it's a very easy one to think about. DSL runs over phone lines. We've seen the phone lines. There's no shielding. There's no, the phone lines are usually these very large groups of copper wires going into what we call a central office or a CO. So you have a lot of data that we're sending out over these wires that maybe you're downloading a file. So that file that you're downloading is going from the CO to your computer. So it's sending you on my network at 500 megabits per second because it can send that signal out. And as it's going to my house, it's getting into a smaller and smaller group of wires to eventually at my house, it's a single set of wires that goes into my house for that download. Now let's reverse that. Let's say I'm sending this stream of video right now to the central office. I send it down my single set of wires. When it gets into my neighborhood, maybe it's clumped together with more wires and more traffic. When it gets to the CO, it's now part of a large group of wires that is going into the CO. And all of those wires all have data on them. And it's a weaker amount of data because it was strong when I sent the data from my house. But as this data goes through that wire, it tends to attenuate. And as it goes farther down the wire, it attenuates even more. So when it finally gets to the central office, it's a much weaker version of that signal than the one that I originally sent. Now take into account that everybody else is sending data into the central office on this large group, and all of those wires have a communication conflict between each other. They can all hear each other effectively. You've got crosstalk. That is your near end crosstalk. It's the crosstalk occurring if you're at the CO, it's the near end. If you're at home, it's the far end crosstalk. That crosstalk is now wires, communication, and signals and voltages that are going through the other wires are now being inductively sent into other wires around it. And because the signal is much weaker, it's now much more difficult to pick out the noise out of that wire. And it's the way that they manage this is they keep it slower on the upload side so there's less noise. It's really about noise. So the less amount of noise on the line, the easier it is for their equipment to be able to pick out your signal and be able to send that along on its way. This is especially true for DSL. It's somewhat true also for cable modem because that's mostly copper going through the connections. But where it isn't a problem is fiber. Fiber doesn't have crosstalk between fiber strands because light doesn't work that way. Light doesn't have any voltages that can be received and have crosstalk and switch between one fiber or another. There are some cases where that's not exactly true, but we're going to keep it very broad for now. So fiber doesn't have this crosstalk issue, which means we can send data down the fiber, and on the other end, it's able to receive that light just fine. And if we send data the other direction, and many people are coming into a single CO, well, it's okay. All of the fiber comes in, and we're not having to deal with noise and fiber crosstalk. There is no fiber crosstalk. So there's no crosstalk issue. So we can have a synchronous connection that is just as much bandwidth going down as going back up, and now we're good to go. Now we don't have to worry about that. That's why you often see this difference in bandwidths for this asymmetric communication speeds on the download versus the upload. It's just a noise issue. And the only way that we would all be able to communicate is if we all communicate a little bit slower to be able to send that through. That's why. And that's why when you often see companies putting fiber in the ground, the Google networks that started this, the AT&T networks, the Xfinity is now putting fiber in the ground. I've got a local provider here who's putting fiber in the ground. Anytime they're bringing fiber to your house, they're often providing you with internet plans that are synchronous, or not synchronous, but symmetric, where you would have 1 gig down, you also have 1 gig up. Now, in the end, it's probably unusual for anybody to send that much data outbound. Most of what we are doing at our homes is all inbound traffic. It's all downloaded from somewhere else. We're watching a video on a streaming provider. So we're watching a Disney Plus video. All the data is coming down to us. We're sending a little bit of data back. So naturally, in most people's homes, that asymmetric speed isn't a problem. In fact, it's kind of normal. So you don't even notice that your upload speed is much slower than the download because you rarely use it. My network, very different. So on my network, I have a definite need to upload things to you because I want you to see this video. So I'm sending a lot of data up to you. When I finish putting my videos together on my training courses, I need to send them all up to YouTube. And I'm sending gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of data with each video. And it takes a number of minutes to get all of that uploaded because I only have a 25 megabit pipe to be able to get that to you. I wish it was 500. It would upload an instant. I'd be great. I wish it was a gig. If they provided me a symmetric communication where it was a gig down and a gig up, sign me up. I'm there. I'm fine with that. That's what I would do. I think that'd be a great thing to focus on. So one day, someday, in the not far distant future, perhaps I will have a network connection to the internet that will provide me as much upload speed as download speed. Until that time, we're doing pretty good with our 25 megabit. In fact, you can see our cache number, for those of you that paid attention, currently at 3%, which means we're able to keep track of this. I'm sending a 1080p HD signal out to YouTube. So I'm probably using, well, what's it telling me I'm using? It's right here, 5.9 megabits per second. So 5.91 megabits per second. So all I really need is about 6 megabits per second to get the video signal to YouTube. So I still got plenty of upload bandwidth available of that 25. Now, if I was running 4K, that number might be higher than that. It probably won't be 4 times that amount, but it's going to be at least twice, maybe 3 times that amount, depending on the compression that I decide to use on that link. Those are also important because I have to keep track of that. But the reason I don't send 4K is because there's a delay, and a significant delay, 20 to 30-second delay associated with sending 4K. And we do such interactive things when we're answering questions that just doesn't work. So that's why you see 1080p from me and why we don't have to worry that I'm running 5.82 megabits per second. And that's the way we work through. So shouldn't it be symmetrical internet with cable internet? It's the same problem. You have a lot of copper coming into a single point. There's going to be a lot of crosstalk, and you have the same issue you have with DSL. Anytime there's copper, there's noise. And when you have that much copper coming into one single point, there's a lot of noise. So that's why. Now, in reality, most of the cable companies they're converting over into more fiber-based connections, and that helps quite a bit when you finally get back to the central office that they have set up to their data centers. But they also have to think about all of the links in between. So they can't just say, for some people, we'll give you a different internet plan than other people. I mean, that's the real challenge. Nobody likes their internet provider anyway. That's sort of a universal truth. It doesn't matter who your internet provider is, you hate them. It's just one of those things in the industry we often talk about. But I really struggle with that. And you'll also find a good point from Zayed in the chat room. Zayed has fiber. His download speed, 250 megabits per second. His upload speed, 100 megabits per second. Wait a second. You just said with a fiber network, you could have symmetric communication, symmetric speeds upload and download without the problems associated with copper. That's absolutely true. You could. But that doesn't stop your internet provider from still limiting your access. They've capped your upload speed as a way to manage bandwidth effectively. It's now turned into something that's not a technical problem. It's not a physics problem. It's an administrative problem. So they're keeping their upload bandwidths lower by artificially limiting your upload speeds. And that's why we hate our internet service provider. All I needed was one example. There it is. For those of you wondering, no, not everybody hates their internet. Yes, they do. Everybody hates their internet provider. You just can't help it. That's it. One of these days, I hope to be on a network that really does provide symmetric, but will I even take advantage of it? That's the real question. Is there ever a time when you're going to need more than 100 megabits of upload speed with your current configuration? I know there's a time in the future, perhaps that's true. But as we sit here today, do you even need 100 megabits? That's 4 times what I'm getting. I'm making do. So that's the other side of this, is that you could complain that you're not getting 250 megabit upload, but are you even using 100? So there you go. That's the very long explanation of the internet and bandwidths. And there's, of course, more things behind the scenes with the type of equipment you're using, the capabilities of the equipment. To be able to do the symmetric communication, you need to be able to have equipment that's much faster. That equipment is going to be more expensive. Cable companies don't buy one of anything. They need hundreds of things that they are purchasing. Everybody has to be trained on the equipment at an internet service provider. You have to transfer or migrate that equipment out. It has to be tested. There's all these things behind the scenes. And on top of all of that, the internet service provider has to have a lot of tools behind the scenes to help them manage this network, how to do proper billing, how to do maintenance, how to do monitoring, how to perform security, how to stop denial of service, how to manage copyright. It goes on and on and on and on. This is why I'm not an ISP. This is remarkable, the things they have to be able to do. But they do it. Is it perfect? It is not. Does it work pretty well? Yeah, it works pretty well. At least in the U.S., we do pretty good on that. So I think that's the idea. So that is the focus anyway for someone who is focusing on those. So I noticed in the chat room a number of you are still working on A+. This was obviously a Network Plus study group, but I will take questions about anything. It doesn't have to be about A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus. It could be about your internet service provider, and it could be about asymmetric speeds. Have to figure it out. go through all of those. Let's see other questions that have come through. A number of you have mentioned that I do not have a Network Plus practice exams book. So thank you for mentioning that. That is indeed the case. We talked about that earlier. So maybe someday. I would like to see in the coming months, perhaps we could have finally a practice exams book for Network Plus. We don't currently have one, but hopefully someday we'll have one. Do I have a mnemonic to remember the 802.11 standards? I don't. My way to memorize the 802.11 standards is to use them from their inception. So when 802.11a and b were introduced, which were done at the same time, both of those, I use networks. I use both A and B networks on those, and we sort of just upgrade through the years. So there's a knowledge just having used these in the past that helps me. But I can imagine just stepping into it, and you've never seen these standards before, that's a lot to memorize. Now, in my video, I give you a chart to sort of show you here's the differences between all of those, but I don't have a mnemonic. I've seen some mnemonics on this. Someone was talking about one in our Discord earlier, I want to say today or yesterday. That was pretty good. But some of these mnemonics, though, almost require you memorizing more for the mnemonic than you would have memorized if you would have just memorized that 802.11a runs at 54 megabits per second. You just remember that, and you were fine. In reality, you'll probably not get a lot of questions about A, B, G, maybe not even N, because they're so old and they've been replaced through the years. It's good to know where these standards come from and what the differences are. And you could certainly be asked questions on A, B, G, and N. But it's probably more likely you'll get questions on some of the newer flavors, I would think. Maybe I'm wrong with that one, but that's what I think it would be. For the N10-008, what routing protocols would you suggest we really hammer on during our studies? The only ones you need to know are in the exam objectives. Same thing applies, by the way, for port numbers. I'm going to bring up a set of the exam objectives for the N10-008, just so you can sort of see the approach that I take when I make the videos. And it's a good approach, generally speaking, for these exams, because CompTIA does not go very far from the objectives. They stay very close to the set of objectives, and I'm glad they do. So here are the N10-008 objectives. Those objectives, let's look at port numbers. So I'm going to go forward a little bit in this list because they start the port numbers here in section, here they are, section 1.5. It's a big list, isn't it? For Network Plus, it should be, because you're going to be working with these quite a bit. And even though it's a relatively large list, what is it, 20, 22 different port numbers you need to know, somewhere in there? This is, I don't want to be flippant when I say it this way, but this is all you would need to know. I know that doesn't sound very good when I say it like that, but I mention this because people have come to my site and they've said, I have this document of 8 pages of 2 columns each that lists every port number known to man. And I've been working to memorize these. It sure is taking me a long time. And I said, why are you memorizing hundreds of port numbers? You only need to know 22 or 25 or whatever it is. That's where you focus. So that's why I tell people, go to your exam objectives. It will tell you how many you need to know and exactly what you need to know. The problem is the memorization part. This is probably one of the few sort of rote memorization things you need to know for the exam. Now, fortunately, you've probably used some of these before. You've probably used port 80, HTTP, that's your browser. You probably use port 443, HTTPS, also your browser, along with other things. The SSL and TLS we've talked about many times in our videos. I always like getting a study group or a set of messages from people telling me how wrong I am to use SSL and that I should never use SSL and I should always use TLS. And of course, I mentioned this in the videos that we don't use SSL. Hardly anybody uses SSL. It's hard to find somewhere using SSL. We all use TLS, but we don't call it TLS. We always call it SSL. So even though I say the words SSL termination, SSL encryption, SSL proxy. Those are very common terms we would even use today. We really mean TLS proxy, TLS encryption. Really, we're not saying what we are saying what we mean, but we're using the wrong words. But SSL, it's so easy to say SSL. SSL. I'm using SSL. No, I'm using TLS. TLS is so much harder to say. You have to say TLS. There's too much happening in the mouth. So SSL so easy. Just rolls right off the tongue. And that's why we still say SSL. Because it's so easy to say SSL. That's why. So I get it. It's technically wrong. But it's how we say it. It's just how we do it. So I know you go to a website, you buy an SSL certificate. It's not really SSL. It's really TLS. It's a TLS certificate. Do we call it a TLS certificate? No, we do not. Is it a TLS certificate? Yes, it is. So I get it. And I'm with you with your frustration. I am absolutely understanding your frustration with this. If you're wondering why that's a thing, I welcome you to talk to the folks that are studying for A+ about the latest USB names. So that will make you so much happier. And you can easily remember SSL is really TLS. So that's why we have that there for those pieces. Question in the chat room. I'm not going to do a lot of this because I don't think it's really necessary, but I will talk about why we do this. The question is, can you explain the collision and broadcast domains of switches and routers? How are they common? How are they separate? And that's a very big question, to the point that there's an entire video on this for those, and how they are different and why we have one or the other. It's sort of a weird thing to teach people these days. It's along the lines of teaching someone the TCP/IP model, or to teach someone the benefits of token ring or frame relay. You know, these are older technologies, and the idea of determining a collision domain these days is a relatively antiquated idea, because on almost any network you will ever run into, ever. I say almost, really I mean all of them. On any network you run into, there's not going to be collisions. It's all full duplex. You'll never have an Ethernet collision again in your life. But we still teach, for some reason, we're still compelled to teach you what a collision domain means. Now, where it really helps you, where understanding what a collision is and where you would look for it, where it really helps you is in troubleshooting, because there could be times when a system is incorrectly configured to communicate at half duplex, and you're seeing collisions and late collisions show up, and you need to understand what that means. And you need to understand it's not, collisions isn't, it sounds like such a bad word. If you're in a car and there's a collision, that's awful. If you're on a network and you have a collision, that's normal. So that's the problem with the name collision, is it sounds like it's fatal. It sounds like it's an awful thing to ever have happen. Oh, we had a collision. This network is in dire straits because we got one collision. No, it's normal. And in fact, when I started networking back in the day, we did not have full duplex Ethernet. It didn't exist. There was no such thing. All Ethernet was half duplex, and all Ethernet networks had collisions. They were normal. The problem is that the more traffic you have on a network, the more collisions you have. And the more traffic you have, and the more collisions you have, and the more traffic you have, and the more collisions you have. And eventually you have so much traffic going through that a bulk of what you're sending over the network has to be retransmitted because it suffers from these collisions. So that's why we really focused on explaining to people how to properly segment their networks. We had different ways to describe how you should configure your network. Go look for the 3-2-1 rule. That's a good example of how to build, and don't go look at the 3-2-1 rule. It is antiquated rule of how to design a half duplex Ethernet network, of which you will never do in your life, because why would you? use full duplex Ethernet. We use switch networks today. Switches allow us full duplex. And because of that, collisions disappeared completely. They are gone. You will not see them. Collisions is an Ethernet, a wired 802.3 Ethernet term. You do not have collisions on wireless. Do you have interference where two stations can communicate at the same time? Yes, but we don't call that a collision. Probably because people don't like the name collision. We came up with interference. So that's why you don't have that term even though functionally it's sort of the same thing. But we don't use the term anymore for wireless. And that's why. So although we could talk a lot about collision domains, I don't tend to talk about it more than what's in my video because it's a relatively useless bit of information. It's not going to help you. For most Ethernet networks, it's full duplex. Now, broadcast domains, the ability to broadcast is on a local switch network. Broadcast, we were talking earlier about broadcast storms and how broadcast storms can be a significant problem on networks where you have excessive broadcasts because everybody on that local network, switch network or Ethernet network, everything between routers, because broadcasts don't hop over routers. So everything that's between you and every other device on your same subnet, they all hear the same broadcasts. So you can imagine if there's one device that is constantly blasting out a broadcast onto the network, even at full duplex, even at everywhere you go, this is a really good example of where broadcast can really cause significant performance problems on a network. And that's why I tell people, absolutely look at how many broadcasts are on your network. Broadcasts are going to be there whether you are half duplex, full duplex, whether you're on Ethernet, whether you're on wireless, whether you're communicating over barbed wire. They're always going to be there. So broadcasts are much more of an issue today than collisions are by far. They're a constant worry. Now, we've done a lot better with broadcasts through the years. One thing is that our networks go a little faster, so the broadcasts go by a little bit faster and go away. But one of the challenges you have is that everybody in the network sees these broadcasts, so excessive amounts of these broadcasts really do create a performance problem, not only for bandwidth, but for every device that now has to interpret every broadcast that come in to see if it's something they should be working through. That's why in IPv6, no broadcasts. We got rid of them. We threw them out. If you're running IPv6, you don't have to worry about broadcast storms because there are no broadcasts in IPv6 by design. We just engineered it right out of the network. Brilliant. So worked well to be able to do that. It really worked fantastic. The problem, though, we don't tend to run a lot of IPv6 on our networks yet. We have some IPv6 running. Maybe your network is IPv6 ready. My network is all my systems run IPv6. That's not the view I wanted. Here we go. So all of these systems have IPv6 configured on them. This one has IPv6. That one has IPv6. I communicate to a number of different internet sites over IPv6, but relatively speaking, it's a very small amount of traffic because you really have to have the right configuration on both ends. The network in between has to support it. There's a lot of things that have to be in place for IPv6 to work properly. And most of the time, if those are set up, works great on my internet connection. But sometimes it communicates to a site doesn't have IPv6 and I have to talk IPv4, which means I'm now back to worrying about broadcast storms. So there you go. That's a very short and not so sweet explanation of dealing with collision domains and broadcast domains. But I would recommend you really go back and look at that video as part of the Network Plus course, where I kind of break these out. There's pictures, there's diagrams. I show you where the domains start, where they end, and why it's so important. I don't go into that. In that video, I don't go into the sort of the history. I don't talk about why collisions aren't useful anymore, or at least I don't talk a lot about how collisions are seen on a normal network. We really talk about how collisions are seen on an abnormal network. When there's a problem, when there's troubleshooting that needs to be done, it's a great way to see, is something going wrong? Ooh, I see late collisions. I see any collisions. I see normal collisions. Something's wrong. It's turned into more of a canary in a coal mine, because collisions now should never be there. And if suddenly the canary starts dropping, we start suddenly seeing collisions on our network, something has gone horribly wrong. And we need to figure out why we're seeing collisions at all, because that number should be 0, just as the number of CRC errors should be 0. So there's your example for that. I know that's not a great example, and it's not on an exam, and I don't know if it will help you or not, but that's my quick summary anyway of being able to work through that. And that's really the focus. Tony in the chat room asks, what do I think of CISSP? CISSP is a security-focused certification. It is probably best known as kind of the gold standard of security certifications, primarily because it not only goes through quite a broad array of topics, like you really have to be very knowledgeable in IT security to earn your CISSP, but it also requires you to have a certain amount of industry experience and number of years. I think you have to have 5 years of experience, 3 years of experience, something like that in security to even earn your CISSP exam. You know, you can take the exam, but you're really not CISSP certified until you have the amount of proper experience in the industry. And that experience has to be signed off, or this used to be the case, it has to be signed off by someone who already has their CISSP. So that's the real challenge. You have to find somebody who already has it who can vouch for you, and then you have to provide the proper documentation. So that's how I focus on those. But CISSP is what everybody in security wants to have, because many employers want you to have it. And if you're looking to get a job in security or move between jobs in security, that's a good one to have listed on the resume, because people go, oh, okay, you've got the gold standard in security. You've been doing this for a while. You have practical experience in security. You have the certifications, and you probably have other things that you've done as well. If you've been in the field that long, you can talk to somebody about setting up next generation firewalls, setting up a SIM, setting up authentication factors, understanding what you did to set up a series of dynamic IPsec tunnels, talk about an authentication mechanism you installed or set up. You know, all of those things around that. I think George in the chat room is right. CISSP jobs start at $125,000 US. That's probably about right for an annual salary. Certainly in the 6 figures. Certainly. And that's sort of in our industry for technology, we want the 6-figure salary. We're working hard towards that 6-figure number, whatever it happens to be. And I think that's pretty applicable for someone in security. You know, you don't jump into a security role right out of college. You don't jump into a security role really right into IT. You usually start at a service desk or help desk scenario. You move into operating systems, networking, and then finally you work your way into security. So the CISSP, during that time frame, you've been working on your CISSP. You've been learning about security. You've been putting in some of these security functions so that you can then work your way into those larger scale jobs. Security and networking certainly come with some very nice salaries. So that's where that idea comes from. And CISSP gives you that big gold check mark, the big gold star that says, yep, you're very knowledgeable in security and you have some industry experience behind you. So now let's talk about other things that you've learned in security. So there you go. George says, yep, but it can be boring. Some CISSPs I know spend their days filling out forms and paperwork and checklists. It can be. Some jobs in security are very administrative. Some jobs in security are very dynamic. I had a job in security that was a sales engineer position. I went to multiple customers every day, multiple sites. We would talk to different people all the time. I'd visit different networks and data centers every day. There would be a whole different set of problems that needed to be solved. We would plug into different networks every day and see different things every time. I had the job that every day was a different job. I didn't have my CISSP though. I never got the CISSP. I qualified for it. I could have taken it. I never did. At the time, I was in a job working this very high level security job, and I really felt like that was the last job I'd ever have. Boy, was I wrong. That was a mistake. Not the case, because now this is what I do. But at the time, I already had the job. I did not need the CISSP. Had I been in a position where I needed to move from that job into a new position in security, I would have absolutely taken my CISSP. No question. There would not even been a hesitation. Of course I would have taken it. I would have studied. I would have gotten all the topics down, and I would have passed that exam, because I know the next job I need to look for, they're going to be looking for that certification. So that's where that comes from. Now, this is, and although it's true, it's a bad, I will tell you, George, that's probably not a great comparison, because as George says, life experience frequently trumps CISSP, and this is kind of a common thing you will hear on the internet, is that, well, you can get a certification, but experience is more important. Nobody really said that it wasn't, so it's kind of an odd thing for some people to bring up. Like, we understand the differences between experience and certifications and formal education and other things we do. We get it. We know. We never said that that was the case, and we never said that CISSP trumps everything. Nobody thinks that. That's probably the oddest part about the statement, is you will not find anybody who ever says, well, you can have your experience, but CISSP is so much better than experience. Nobody's ever said it. But George, you're not wrong. So that's the problem. Technically, George is correct. Is experience does, for many employers, tend to be more important than a certification. But the CISSP requires you to already have experience in the industry to have earned the cert to begin with. So by telling someone that you have the CISSP, automatically brings with it a certain level of practical real-life experience. So that's why we tell people that, is that I have a CISSP. Oh, you've already worked in the industry for a number of years. You already know about security. That's correct, because I have a CISSP. Then they can tell you that the experience is more important. That's the argument you always hear. Yeah, it's more important. You may not be wrong. However, I will tell you that I have worked for employers who preferred not hiring people with experience. What? Why would you not hire someone with experience? That doesn't make sense. Oh, really? Look at it from the perspective of the employer. We could pay somebody 6 figures who has their CISSP, or I could pay somebody $75,000 who doesn't have the experience yet, and I could train them as we go. So it's a numbers game, right? It's finding the right match for the job. And that for that particular company, they felt that they were saving money by hiring people with less experience and then training them up. Now, what they found, of course, is that they would train them up and then they would go somewhere where they'd make a lot more money. But that, from the perspective of that employer, they were okay with that. It's not like employers don't know this. Of course they know that. It's sometimes funny to hear people say, to explain, yes, but the employers is cutting off their nose to spite their face. They are hiring people at a cheaper rate. They're just eventually going to walk out the door, and it's a revolving door of people. They know that. They already know that. They might not have told you that, or they might pretend they don't know that, but they know that. I've been in these meetings. They are all completely aware of both the positive and the negative sides of this, but they're just fine to go through that. So that's where that approach comes from, is focusing on that. That's why. Now, there are different organizations that need trained, knowledgeable people. And I think the CISSP is a good example of that. I've said CISSP too many times now. I think we're done with that. I think we're good. But the same thing applies for other certifications. You know, getting a Palo Alto Networks certification will help you with customers that need Palo Alto Networks knowledge. Getting a Cisco security certification will help you with clients that have a lot of Cisco security products. These are very normal things in security. And you'll often find that there's not a lot of very broad, overreaching certifications once you get up into the security field. CISSP is a really good example of one. Now name another one that's not from ISC squared. You know, it becomes kind of difficult to find a broad, okay, maybe the CISSP plus, maybe CISSA plus kind of fits there. All right, now I'm out. Now I'm done. That's it. What you generally find at that level is people are getting certifications that come from particular vendors that particular company uses. So they will go to Palo Alto Networks and have everyone get their Palo Alto Network certification because they have Palo Alto Networks firewalls. Maybe they have Checkpoint firewalls. Everybody in that organization gets Checkpoint certified. See how that works? But the same thing kind of applies with other technologies in security. So it might be Cisco, it might be Checkpoint, it might be Palo Alto Networks, it might be another security company. So that's why I mentioned that. It just depends on the company and what they're using. And that tends to be where it is. And you'll see it when you look at these job postings. They'll say required knowledge of Palo Alto Networks firewalls or Palo Alto Networks certifications or whatever it happens to be. And then you instantly know, oh, they got Palo Alto Networks devices. You already know what firewalls they're running at that point. Maybe that's good or bad, but that's the truth. That's what you often see to be able to break those down. Another question that came through is from Zayed, who's, as we saw earlier, the age of 13, studying up for these certifications, and asked the question, and a good one to ask, should I be getting the Network Plus at 13? Is it a waste of money? There's a good approach that you could take at that point. At 13, you're not looking for a job. You're not looking to start a family. You're not looking to move out and start your life away from your parents. At least you shouldn't be. The idea, though, is what is the value of a certification? And the value of a certification is different depending on who you talk to. For people that are in these IT areas, they're working on IT, they do things with IT, that Network Plus certification may be incredibly important. It may be giving them the start to a job working with network administration. Maybe they already have a job and they're getting a better job in their company, or maybe they're getting their first job in IT and whoever they're interviewing with really wants them to have a solid foundation in networking. Network Plus is a good example of where that would fit. But if you're 13, you're probably not on the job hunt. You're trying to figure out what you're doing with this technology once you finally get your high school diploma, your college degree, and then finally on your way. When I was 13, I was obsessed with technology. And to be fair, back in the day when dinosaurs ruled the earth, we were just getting home computing devices at that time. Growing up, the video games I used to have were mechanical video games. They weren't even video games. They were mechanical games. And eventually, the transistor allowed us to have very inexpensive actual handheld video games. That was a banner type of thing to have. They were very simplistic at the time, but they were electronic. They had chips, they had transistors, they had battery power. They were electronic devices. And the same thing happened to me, is that I liked the games, but I was happier opening up those devices to see what's inside. How does this thing work? What is inside of this that makes those things appear on the screen? And I enjoyed the mechanics of it, understanding how it worked, because once you understood how it worked, you could apply that to almost any type of electronic, apply it to almost any type of machine, electronic device, including computers. And the same thing sort of applies to networks. Where I got introduced to really the details of networking was the first time I ever saw a protocol analyzer. So if you're 13 and you're trying to figure out how does this thing work, go load up Wireshark. In fact, you probably already have it, knowing you, Zayed. Go get your Wireshark, go watch the packets going by. What you're doing is you're building a knowledge base that you will be able to use for the rest of your career. Zayed says, I do have Wireshark. I knew you did. You're building a set of things to know about that will be able to help you understand how to solve real world computing problems in the future. As I mentioned earlier in the study group, what we do in IT is we solve problems. It is one constant problem solving event after another. And it's one of the reasons we love doing what we do, because there are a group of people out there that love problem solving. There are a group of people that hate solving problems. We know them. We're probably related to some of them. We may be married to some. The idea is that I think there's a type of mindset or a type of brain structure where problem solving is fun and exciting. And in fact, the more difficult it is, the more fun it is, and the more exciting it is to fix it. And I think a lot of that gets into IT. The best IT people I've ever worked with are ones that are naturally curious. They want to know how it works, and they want to know how to fix the problem when it happens. And it's very true that after hours, when we sit around the bar at an event, maybe we're at a trade show and we're talking with others, almost inevitably the conversation turns to, I ran into this crazy problem the other day. You won't believe how we fixed this. And we start telling, it's a story. We start having the industry stories about it. And here's another thing we did. And here's in the trenches what happened this day. And we go down that line, and people are trying to figure it out as you go. Oh, was it this? Was it that? Did you replace the cable? What was it? Did you do a firmware upgrade? I heard the firmware was bad. Did you? And we're sort of figuring it out as we go. I'm like, wait, no, it gets better. And we go through the stories, because we're trying to show a problem-solving process and explain to other people the problem-solving process, and it's just as exciting to them as it was to us. I think anything you learn in IT not only helps you, even if you're 13, understand how this technology works. These are things you will use throughout your career. This is a set of knowledge, because if you're already in this into it when you're in high school, you're going to be doing something with technology when you get out. If you're not, you've made a mistake, because that's really, you can already see there's an appeal there. You've already loaded Wireshark. Of course, you're going to do something with technology, and there's plenty of jobs out there, and the jobs pay really, really, really well. So of course you will. This is where I tell people they should really, Zayed says, my mother's forcing me to be a doctor. Well, tell her you would like to make more money than doctors. Tell her that you would like to have more autonomy than a doctor and more upward mobility than a doctor. And you're going to be in IT, because they have much more money than the doctors have. And that is just straight up honest. Now, maybe it's not a thing about doctors. Maybe your mom wants you to be a doctor so you help people. You can also help people in IT. You could be part of the team putting together. See, Zaya's already said she doesn't care about the money. I know, but you do. And your wife will. Your significant other will absolutely care about the money. I guarantee you. There's this thing about wanting to eat and have a place to stay, and they want clothes to wear. It's just this constant ongoing thing. And I think I like doctors. I married a nurse. I'm big into medicine, and I think that's great. These things tend to take care of themselves, though. Don't worry that what someone else might want for you, they really do want the best. Especially if your family already has doctors in it. They know the process. It's the same thing if you talk to somebody who is the son or daughter of a lawyer. They want them to be a lawyer because they know what it takes to earn the money and the process and the training and the schooling and all the things you have to know to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, to be those types of things. Of course, they want you to be one. But I find technology probably is a better fit than that. And I think most parents, once you show them, well, guess what? I'm going to do technology because there's more money in it. I don't really want to be as poor as a doctor. I don't want to be as poor as you guys. I want to be a technologist. Don't say that. Don't tell them that. Doctors make fine money. IT people make more money than doctors. They just do. And it's a much better job. It's a much, and this is from the perspective of training, of ongoing knowledge you have to maintain, of just your work hours. We sometimes talk about being on call in IT, although there's plenty of jobs in IT where you are not on call. And as the doctors are waking up at 3 o'clock and having to deal with some type of medical issue, you're sleeping. And that's the deal. So I think there are some benefits there. I'm very focused on the money because I'm just built that way. I like a salary. I like a big salary in IT. I like that part of it. But there is a satisfaction in IT of solving problems, working on very important networks. It's true. That's the way it works. And there are some, as people in the chat room are mentioning to me, hey, wait a second. There's some doctors that make some bank. There's some plastic surgeons out there that are millionaires. There absolutely is. Absolutely true. There's like 7. There's not a lot. So this is the challenge. I am focused on the money. I've said in other types of live streams that I am coin operated, that I don't jump from job to job just because of the money, but it's an important part of this. People in the chat room were wondering, IT makes more money than a doctor? Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. No question. But somebody has to take care of the HIPAA requirements. Somebody has to make sure all the data is encrypted. Somebody has to make sure that the MRI is working properly, that the data from the MRI is being transferred properly over the network. You could still work in medicine, but from a technological perspective. So there is a way to make everyone happy here. There is a way to work with medicine and make people better, but also work with technology. And I think that's a win-win. And maybe that's the approach you start on now, but you got a long time. You're 13, you got plenty of time to work through this and figure out what the options are. So there's ways to go with this. So Mom was also saying that. See, there's opportunity there. There's ways to kind of break through. See, robotic surgeons, that sounds kind of interesting, but still a surgeon nonetheless. And maybe you find once you get older, the idea of medicine is more interesting to you. Maybe that line is one that things change over time. You'll figure it out. For me, it was technology. It was obvious. And if that's the case with you, then that's what you'll end up doing anyway, because you'll fail right out of doctor school. You won't do very well in pre-med. I started my career, my first major in college was electrical engineering, which I thought would be the closest thing I could find to IT from where I was, but in reality, it had nothing to do with IT. And I had to take a year of chemistry, which was just a painful situation for me because I was really bad with chemistry. Did not do well. Shift gears, though, second year, shift gears over to business. So that's the way that worked. Did I know I was going to get a degree in business management? I did not. But that's sort of where it comes from. In the chat room, people asking about opening phone lines. We're not doing any phone lines today, but I am taking questions from the chat room. You check our clock here. We're doing pretty well. I could take one or two more. I did go to an engineering school. I went to Florida State and went to their engineering college to learn engineering. But that first year, I just did not. It was just not a fit. It just didn't work for me. So that's the way that was. What was my first IT job then? I guess technically my first IT job was in college. I got a job working with the computer center at my local university, the college I was going to, and I got a job working in operations, which means you are in a dark room with a bunch of screens in front of you. Not much has changed. Dark room with lots of screens in front of you, and you look at the screens, and if the screens are moving, you can still stay seated and not do anything. But if any of these screens stops moving, something hangs, you have to pull a book out and you have to call somebody who knows what to do because you don't know what to do. So that's the problem when you work in operations. You know enough to look at a screen and you're babysitting. You're a technologist who is a babysitter. And you're babysitting the machines, and when the machine stops working, you call somebody who knows what to do, and then they come in and they fix the problem, which paid pretty well, actually. from that perspective. And it worked really well. You actually learn a lot because when things break, you see how they break and you watch someone else solve the problem. We're in IT. We love to solve problems. And so it was interesting to see the process they would go through to solve the problems. And the process they would go through is really the same process we use today in working through all of these things that we do. It's the same troubleshooting steps every time. Gather information, do some testing to see if this solves the problem. If it does, implement the fix, test it, make sure the fix works, go home and sleep. That's what they would do, sort of rotate through. So I think that was a great job to have. That was my very first quote unquote IT job, technology job, where somebody paid me for that. So it worked out pretty well. Today, I guess it would be more of a help desk. This was sort of a help desk where nobody called you. I still had certain things I had to do. There was one big major printer and plotter. So jobs would come off of the plotter. I would roll them up and put them in the proper bins outside. You know, there's lots to go through. Very, very, very important paper pushing is what I would do. But that's an example anyway of an IT job and where I went with that. After finishing college and getting my first job outside of college, I worked for a computer company in South Miami. I say computer company, they were a company that sold computers. So they sold IBMs and Compaqs and other manufacturers' computers. And I was the field service person. So if somebody needed something delivered, I would deliver it. If somebody made a delivery, but they forgot to send the printer cable with it, I was the guy who had to go take the extra printer cable on the delivery and then plug it in. So that was what I did. I got upgraded eventually to the guy who would replace memory modules or install or upgrade hard drives or whatever it happened to be. So that's a good example of just being on the road all the time. I would go into the shop in the morning, get my list of things I needed to do, get my inventory that I needed to take with me, hit the roads of South Florida, listening to WIOD and Neil Rogers, and just go everywhere throughout the day from place to place. And then at the end of the day, come back, hand in my paperwork and go home. That was field service. Oof. Even worse, I didn't live in South Miami. I lived in the northern part of Dade County. So it was quite a drive. It was just a lot of driving every day to go back and forth between all of those places. And that was the first job out. And then eventually upgraded from there to a corporate service desk, corporate help desk. So I could drive to one building every day, stay in that building all day and solve problems there in that building and then drive home at night. I loved that. What a difference. Didn't have to be on the roads all day. I was just happy to be there and they knew it. And I would solve problems for them. And then that would just keep going. I would just continue to have jobs after that. We've talked about that. But those are the ones I focused on. Everybody has a different path. Everybody has a different set of options. Everybody has different opportunities available to them. There's no single rail that you have to stay on to be able to get from point A to point B. You make your own path. Just figure out what you like to do. That's a great way to do it. Joe says, I got Network Plus booked for next weekend. Great. Is there anywhere to practice the performance-based questions? I'd recommend going through the last set of 12 months for this study group, and there's a different performance-based question every month. So their first new question of every study group is a performance-based question. That's what I would recommend you look through. George asks, so I'm a native Floridian. Have I ever lived in another state? The only other state I've ever lived in is confusion. Nope, I've stayed in Florida my whole life. I grew up in North Florida. I have worked in South Florida and lived in South Florida, and that's just where I've been. It's just been Florida. I do not like the cold. I do not like the cold weather. Not my thing. You grew up in Florida, you're just so used to the warmth. You're so used to the sun. There's certainly advantages and disadvantages of being here, but I think the advantages far outweigh. In fact, one of the first times I ever went to a place that is cold, it was snowing, and there were there were sticks. We went to a parking lot of the corporation where I was working. And in the parking lot were these enormous sticks that went like 10 feet up in the air that were like on every curb. There was a stick that went 10 feet in the air. I'm like, what in the world why are these sticks everywhere? There's stick. And they said, oh, that's so we can find the curb once it starts snowing. I thought, you people are crazy. You're honest. Why do you live here? I do not understand. And they said, of course, you've got to change your tires out at that point, or you've got to set up your house for the winter time, or you got to bring out the winter clothes, or I'm like, what are you talking about? What are winter clothes? So that's the situation up there. Of course, that's normal. That's how you live. We don't understand in Florida. In some way, we're much more stupid when it comes to cold weather. But you kind of get used to it. Certainly, when I got jobs working for larger companies and having a much larger territory, I used to have the whole East Coast, for example, of the United States as a territory. And in some cases, for a year, my territory was international. I would go to different countries. And so you would really have to check what's the weather in those places, check the phone. What am I getting into? Oh, it's snowing. I'm going to Edinburgh in the middle of December. We probably want to find, I now have a jacket. So now let's take our big, heavy jacket with us. Those types of things. I need a hat. You need long clothes. You need long shirt. You need something that's going to keep you warm. Those are things you kind of have to worry through, figure out once you're there. But figuring out the cold was a challenge for me. But eventually you figure those out. But living in Florida, you just don't have any examples. Never been snow skiing. Never really done anything in the snow. Don't like the snow. So why would I? We have plenty of skiing that we do in Florida. None of it related to snow. You just have to worry about the alligators. It's just a minor problem. I told you, it's advantages and disadvantages. And sometimes that's where we have to worry about those. And Scotland did not have a lot of sun. You're right. There was some, but what a great time. Nicest people in the world are in Scotland. So that's an example of, that was a great trip. But the IT allowed me to see Scotland and London and Germany and where else did I go in Europe? Austria and France. And, we just went everywhere. And then I've had meetings in Australia. I've been to Bangkok. We've been to Japan and Korea. There's all these opportunities that suddenly show up because something someone else doesn't. And that's one of the great things about IT is you can become an expert in a particular area, and now people want you to go to those places to talk about your expertise. That is the key. That's the important part of IT to me. So eventually you'll be you'll be working with Wireshark. That was kind of the example that got me going with networking is you'll be working Wireshark, and then you start to notice different things about the way a switch works or the way that TCP works or the way that an application communicates. And you start to become an expert in the way that those things operate so that you can look at any trace file that someone gives you and you know exactly the way that application works. And you can point it out almost immediately. Oh, your problem's right here. Here's your issue right there. You kind of circle it. That's the real benefit to me because now you've got something that people want, which is your ability to look at that screen, understand what you're seeing, and solve that problem quickly. And it'll, at some point, allows you to kind of move up into a level where you can just go from place to place to place, country to country to country, and talk to people about the things you know. A lot of fun. A lot of great things to do that. And a lot of opportunities to be able to do that. Other questions real quick. And this is a good one. Could you advise me on how to find a first job / internship as a student who did not graduate yet? Well, you could follow kind of my model, which is get a job, find a job or find something to do at your school because they just love cheap labor at universities. So if you are in school and there's a computer lab, there's a computing center, there's anything to do with technology, there's an IT group, that's the place to go. And although you mentioned you're in cybersecurity, you're not going to get a job out of school in cybersecurity. I don't know if anyone's told you that. That might be a surprise, but there's not a lot of jobs. There's not a lot of entry-level jobs in security. You work up into a security job. So your first job, you come out of school with a degree in cybersecurity, with a expertise in security, you've still got to go through the help desk. It's the same job everywhere you go. So all you can really hope for before you graduate is get a help desk job. Get it now so that when you graduate, you can tell people, we already been through the help desk. I'm now looking for the next job. I'm looking to level up for this job. And they can level you up into operating systems, Linux, Windows, databases, cloud, networking, whatever it is, they'll level you up into that level. And then you learn everything you need to know about that topic so that you can then level up into security. So this may take a number of jumps to get you there, but the knowledge you're learning is incredibly valuable. You just can't use it quite yet. Although I will tell you, if you're in a very large municipality or a very large area, a big city, there's probably some entry-level jobs in security in a security operations center, or SOC, S-O-C, SOC. The security operations center, what you effectively are is a help desk, but for security. So I don't want to paint a pretty picture. I want to be kind of honest about these jobs. And at a SOC, an entry-level position at a SOC is you're just taking phone calls, figuring out the problem, and then passing that problem on to the person who actually solves it. So I would recommend, if looking at the job postings in your area, look at the big companies in your area, see if they have a SOC, then start finding out who works there, see if you know any of them, see if you know someone who knows somebody who's part of the SOC. And if you haven't graduated yet, you haven't done this already, where's your LinkedIn page? Have you created your LinkedIn page? Do you have connections to the people who are in your classes? Do you have connections to the people you know outside of school? Those are going to help you determine, and it's surprising sometimes, the links between a particular open position and someone who might know somebody who knows something about that position. In any job, IT or otherwise, the way that you get these jobs is sometimes based on what you know, but very often it's based on what you know and who you know. So if you can find somebody who can put in a good word for you, that is very valuable. And for entry-level jobs where there is no experience that can be trumped, that experience doesn't exist. So therefore, having somebody vouch for you is very valuable. And I mentioned this, if you have not had a chance to watch it, my recommendation to you, there's a video in the video description for this video on YouTube, the YouTube video description, how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video, which seems like a long time, but there's no fluff in this video. It's like all of my videos. It's directed, specific information. I don't mess around in these videos. And that's why it's hard for me to go through everything that's in the video, because it really is 30 minutes of very dense information. But it effectively focuses in 4 areas. It tells you need a formal degree. You're working on that. You need some industry certifications. Ostensibly, you're working on that here as well. You need some type of practical experience in the industry. And that doesn't necessarily mean paid, but it does mean you've done some type of IT work that you could mention, working at a school computer lab, for example. And then lastly, the 4th one, you know somebody. So that's how important knowing someone is it's one of those 4 elements. So I would recommend you go watch that video. It's a great way to get some ideas about things you can do, about labs you can set up at home so that you have something to talk about when you're in these interviews with people. And they tell you, well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, oh, well, I've just got my degree in here. I'm working towards this degree. I built a significant computer lab at home where I have set up pfSense, and Snort, and I've caught all kinds of things coming through my network. And just last week, I identified 50 different malware variants that were being sent into my network. I mean, that is a jumping off point that you will never get if you haven't done the work. So you could have the entire rest of the conversation in the interview talk about what you've seen in your lab. And then they know you've done something practically with your time. And this is the problem when you're coming out of college, you don't know for anything. You don't have anything to talk about. You don't have well, we did a project in class, but nobody showed up, and Freddie helped me, but he was a little hungover, and we got through it. Nobody wants to hear that story, but that's sort of how your group study went, right? That's how everyone's group study goes in college. You don't end up you end up learning how to be in a bad group of people. That's what college does for you. But as it turns out, when I was in college, I thought, well, that's stupid. Every single project I'm in is some disjointed, difficult to manage group of people. And then I got into the workforce and I realized every project is a disjointed, hard to work with group of people. It really mirrored college quite closely. Freddie's always coming in with hangover. Bob's never here on Monday. It's just me. So what do? You know, that's probably the most real world you're going to get in college are group projects because of that. So because of that, do your own projects, but do them at home. And I have some ideas on certain projects you can do. If you're interested in Microsoft, set up Active Directory at home. If you're interested in networking, set up pfSense. If you're interested in the cloud, set up some cloud projects. If you're interested in databases, there's tons of great open source databases out there. So this is the idea, is sort of blending together all of these things that are available to you on the internet for free into something that's going to give you the heads up, the leg up, the advantage when you go into an interview. I think that's the key. Right now, I think LinkedIn is probably the best place to go for professionals. Is LinkedIn perfect? It is not. But for the purposes of promoting yourself professionally, for the purposes of keeping track with the people that you have worked with through the years, and for the purposes of maybe even getting you the next job, LinkedIn's pretty powerful. You're certainly at a disadvantage without having it. So that's the thing. You may not love it. I'm not asking you to love it. I'm asking you to use it as a tool. And like any other tool, it can be used a lot, used a little, used in a way that makes sense for you. Find the way that makes sense for you and take advantage of that tool. Because as people in the chat room are saying, it is an outstanding tool, but you have to be able to use it in the proper way. A lot of places, and I think the thing that people hate the most of LinkedIn is that it tends to be a place for braggadociousness. It tends to be a place where people are simply talking about how awesome the place is that they work, or they just got the better job, or look at me, look at me, look at me, which I have no problem with that. I think it's fine. It's sort of human nature. But it can also be a place where you can promote things you're doing without being in people's face. And there are recruiters and employers and people who are looking at your LinkedIn page to see what you have done, actively doing this. So that's probably the suggestion I don't have in my video. Do I have some of that? I might have that in the video, but I think it's a good thing to consider, especially if you're in college. Now's the time to build your network. You're working with a lot of really smart people in your classes. Add them to your LinkedIn. Ask them if they have a LinkedIn. If they say no, ask them why they don't have a LinkedIn. That's what you should be doing, is building out that network, not a computer network, but a people network, which will eventually lead to the computer network. Use one network to get to the other. And that's what I would focus. And another question in the chat room, do I have tips for a job I should start if I want to get into UX design, which is an incredibly interesting area for doing any type of user interface functionality, for figuring out the best way that an application can be designed. It is remarkable. Now, I'm not in any way a computer science person. I'm an IT person. Those two worlds do not touch. They're trying very desperately to push those two sides into the same Venn diagram. They're trying to make that a little bit more of an overlap. It's not working. We just don't overlap. There's too much to know on the computer science side and too much to know on the IT side that one person couldn't possibly do both of those, and that's why we don't. But there's a lot of great jobs out there for user interface design and really understanding design of applications, I'm just the wrong person to ask tips for a job. The only ones I can really say is sort of use the same tips from my how to get a job in IT with no experience. You can do a similar thing, how to get a job in computer science with no experience, by simply swapping out the lab for networking and Active Directory to a lab on mobile applications, or building your own app and doing your own UX, and then going back and showing somebody, here's a couple of designs I went through on my own app and how it changed over time and how it got better and the things that we did. There's a way to do that too. Yes, and as people are mentioning, LinkedIn's a great tool. Make sure you use professional pictures on LinkedIn. We don't want to see at the party. We don't want pictures of your dog. This is your job. You know, what you want people at your job to see. So it would be a nice picture of you, maybe in a tie or a nice outfit, or just dress relatively nice at a nice place with a nice background, with a good view of you. I don't know. Do I have a picture of me on my LinkedIn? What a good question. I know the Professor Messer page does not. I don't add people to LinkedIn unless I've actually worked with them. And there are some. I'm going to sort of zoom up. There's me from a long time ago. So there's the picture I use on LinkedIn. I should probably update the picture to be, it's not even close, is it? It's somebody else. I don't know who that is. But there they are. But I can see in my stream for LinkedIn, people I used to work with. Oh, that's what they're doing now. Oh, that's where she is. That's where he is. I get to see what they're doing, and how they're doing it. So that's really, to me, kind of the fun part, is to watch what people are doing through the years. A lot of fun. I don't generally post on LinkedIn myself, but I like going through, and occasionally I will get a message from somebody on LinkedIn who talks to me about, oh, here's what we're doing and what's up with you, and we get to chat a little bit and catch up. But most people know they can catch me here anyway. They know I'm on the internet on a live stream doing something. So that's really where we focus on my LinkedIn. And there's also a Professor Messer page on LinkedIn where I put my daily pop quiz questions. So there as well. I just I need to update my face picture. That's no good. So I'll take your advantage. I'll take your recommendation for that advantage for the pictures and put them on there too, so that we have something less janky, as it was so aptly put in the chat room. Less jankless is what we're looking for. Maybe I'll get to that point eventually. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of almost another couple of hours, hour and a half of an after show. We did pretty well, I think, for the Network Plus side of things. Feel free as we step through there. The idea of Network Plus has always appealed to me. I really think it's the certification that really is the glue for everything we do in IT. So if you're somebody who is working on your Network Plus, or you're interested in working on Network Plus, you're doing the right thing. That's exactly where you should be. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions in the first hour. Thank you for the Q&A in the second hour. We always go down an interesting road in the second hour, and I thank you for all of that. But this is one of those that is a set of skills that will help you regardless of what you do in IT. And hopefully you can see some of that in the conversations that we have. Thank you for being here. Thanks for everything you do. We will see you on the next study group. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.